the mental transmitter of Marvel. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 151 Atlan. Everyone in the lab stared blankly at the middle-aged mutant. After a long pause, Emma finally spoke, her voice trembling slightly. "What do you want to do? Leave him to me. I have a way to wake him up." The middle-aged mutant looked at Emma sincerely, without a trace of impatience. Emma looked at the middle-aged mutant with hesitation, deeply conflicted. She desperately wanted someone to save Alex, but she also harbored a deep resentment towards the middle-aged mutant, suspecting he had ulterior motives. "Why not here?" Howard stepped forward at Nick Fury's beckoning, looking directly at the middle-aged mutant. "My lab can provide you with anything you need, equipment and materials." The middle-aged mutant turned to look at the still unconscious Alex, smiled faintly, and said slowly but firmly, "There's no way to wake him up here. Are you going to take Alex back to your tribe?" Nick Fury saw this and could only step forward. His tall figure seemed somewhat humbled by the middle-aged mutant. The middle-aged Inhuman nodded, his tone unchanged. After a brief, silent pause, he said, "Yes, why should we trust you?" After a moment's helpless struggle, Emma finally abandoned her prejudice against Inhumans and eagerly asked, a hint of inquiry and hope in her heart. The middle-aged Inhuman pointed at himself and said with pride, "Because I'm Colrond, a member of the Inhuman Royal Guard." Everyone was once again stunned by Colrond's presence. Being an Inhuman Royal Guard, basically, a royal bodyguard, wasn't that something to be proud of? Colrond ignored the other's surprised looks. Turning to point at Alex, he spoke to himself, "He must come back with me. Only in Atlan can he wake up. Is there no other way?" Emma, still somewhat reluctant, asked nervously, looking at the scientists led by Howard. Howard was about to speak when a more honest scientist nearby spoke up. "Given the current situation, if he's not treated promptly, his body will collapse first, and he might even explode." This scientist had a high IQ, but his EQ was far less impressive, and he spoke without a beat. This statement completely put Emma's mind at rest. Seeing Colrond turn around, she nodded and agreed. "I'll let you take Alex, but I want to come with you." "Absolutely not." Colrond shook his head without hesitation, leaving no room for maneuver. "Atlan doesn't allow any outsiders." This remark went unnoticed by many, who took it as an excuse. But Nick Fury was keenly aware of something. He'd heard Howard talk about Alex's past and knew that Alex had a father he'd never met. For this father, Alex had ventured into Europe at the beginning of World War II and even performed remarkable feats. Could Alex's father be an Inhuman? Recalling Alex's past and considering what Colrond had said, Nick Fury easily came to a conclusion. Does Alex also have Inhuman blood? His thoughts raced, and Emma's repeated pleas were ruthlessly rebuffed by Colrond. By the time Nick Fury regained consciousness, Emma had already given up on her request and turned to questioning the timing. "Excuse me, how long will it take to resuscitate Alex?" Colrond hesitated, then shook his head. "That's uncertain. We'll have to wait until we return to Atlan and undergo an examination to find out." Ultimately, Alex was taken away by Colrond, with no definitive information on when he would return. "Howard, aren't I foolish to leave Alex with a stranger like that?" Emma regretted it the moment Colrond disappeared with Alex. Howard smiled wryly, shook his head, and soothed, "Don't worry, Emma, Alex will be back soon." "Is that Colrond safe and reliable?" After blaming herself, Emma began to suspect others. Howard rolled his eyes and was about to speak when Nick Fury, standing beside him, spoke first. "Emma, do you know Alex's father?" "Father? Alex never told me about his family." Emma was stunned and shook her head. Unconsciously, Emma had shaken off her deep regret and turned to look at Nick Fury with a strange expression. "What's wrong?" There were many intelligent people present, and Howard quickly realized what was happening. He looked at Nick Fury with shock. "What do you mean?" Nick Fury nodded, his fleshy face trembling slightly, as if he were smiling. "Maybe this time, Alex can meet his father." Howard, however, was not as optimistic as Nick Fury. He had known Alex the longest and knew him best. Going to Europe to find his father was just an excuse. All these years had passed, and Alex had never mentioned his father, let alone gone looking for him. Alex's hatred for this father, whom he had never met, was probably far greater than the love they had for each other. Howard muttered to himself, but kept silent. This was not a matter he could interfere with. At least for now, it seemed safe for Alex to stay with Kalrand. Leaving aside the Savage Land, Kalrand, carrying Alex, abandoned the fugitive he was supposed to capture and quickly returned to Atlan with Alex. Atlan, the city where the Inhumans had lived in seclusion for generations, invisible to the human world, towering atop Mount Everest, the world's highest peak. Like Posidonia in the Savage Land, Atlan resembled a modern metropolis. The only difference was that Atlan's architecture exuded a closed-off, traditional character, a strange yet harmonious blend of modernity and tradition. When Kalrand appeared in Atlan with Alex, they immediately attracted countless people's attention. Of course, their focus was on Alex, the person Kalrand had brought back. Kalrand, who is he? Someone grabbed the hurried Kalrand and asked in surprise, "Didn't you go to capture Tassim? Why did you carry a person back?" Kalrand raised his hand casually, revealing Alex's face, and then said, "Also, his name is Alex, that one." The person who grabbed Kalrand quickly let go of his hand, with a surprised expression on his face. "Isn't this even more chaotic?" Kalrand nodded, looked at Alex hanging on his body, sighed and said, "I'll take the man over first, and we don't need to worry about how to deal with him specifically. Well, go. I hope nothing will happen." The man waved his hand, turned and left, sighing, "For Atlan." Kalrand sighed when he heard this, and replied faintly, "For Atlan." Chapter 152 Little Alex. Carrying Alex, Kalrand continued toward Atlan's tallest building. It was the most important place in Atlan, home to the Inhuman royal family. Kalrand, who is he? As Kalrand entered the royal residence, he was met by a young man, about 17 or 18, with a fresh, short, black hair. He bowed respectfully. Kalrand greets His Highness Maximus. He paused, glanced back at Alex on his back, and hesitantly said, "I brought this back from outside. It might be related to His Highness Alex, uncle." The young man addressed as His Highness Maximus exclaimed, his face changing in surprise. Kalrand nodded, and with one hand, he lifted Alex's face to reveal him. Maximus took a deep breath and, pulling Kalrand back inside, said as they walked, "Tell me what happened in detail." Kalrand hesitated again, but under Maximus's cold gaze, he finally told him everything. "What?" Maximus was completely shocked, frozen in place for a moment, and it took him a long time to recover. "Kalrand, you should go in alone." Without waiting for Kalrand to speak, Maximus turned and ran away, as if afraid of being contaminated. Watching Maximus retreat, Kalrand shook his head and smiled bitterly. He turned to look at Alex on his back, sighed, and walked back inside. Half an hour later, they found themselves in a lavishly decorated hall. At the head of the hall stood a silver-white throne. An old man with white hair and beard sat on it, a faint smile on his wrinkled face. A dozen chairs also lined the hall, each occupied by a person. Some wore grim expressions, others serene. Standing in the center, feeling the constant glances from all around him, Kalrand couldn't help but feel a sense of dread. He even regretted bringing Alex back. "Kalrand, tell me about his origins," the old man on the throne said in a deep voice, coughing lightly. "As you command, my lord." Kalrand placed his hand on his chest and bowed respectfully. Then he began to explain, beginning with the story of how he captured Tarsem and journeyed to the human world. As Kalrand finished speaking, someone in the chair to his left impatiently stood up and sarcastically asked, "So, you're not sure of his identity either? That requires a detailed explanation." Glancing at the speaker, Kalrand's expression remained unchanged as he spoke calmly. "As I said before I found him, he had just fought with Tarsem and defeated him." Glancing at everyone present, Kalrand continued, "Actually, they had fought before that, and he fled. But just 2 days later, he defeated Tarsem again." "How is that possible?" everyone exclaimed in astonishment. Even the old man on the throne looked stunned. Kalrand smiled faintly and explained, "At first, I didn't understand either. Then, after reviewing the footage of the battle, I noticed something strange." "What's strange?" This time it was the old man on the throne who spoke. His expression had returned to calm, only a hint of anxiety remained in his eyes. "In the first battle, he was terrified of Tarsem's energy spheres," Kalrand explained bluntly, without further mystery. "But in the second, he was no longer afraid of them and even began to absorb them." Before anyone could express their surprise, Kalrand spoke again, offering his theory. "Tarsem's abilities are truly remarkable. His energy spheres carry a tiny amount of the power of the Terrigen mist. This is how the inhuman genes in him are activated. However, because the mutation power isn't sufficient to complete his mutation, He remains unconscious. As Colrond finished his words, the entire hall fell silent. They knew the power of the Terrigen mist, and they knew of Tarsim's abilities. Colrond's theory was correct. After a long pause, someone finally spoke. It was the old man sitting on the upper throne. You say, he's a mutant? Yes, Colrond nodded, then added, he's the leader of the mutants, and he has a very good relationship with humans. The old man nodded silently, then turned to the people on either side and asked, what do you think? This single sentence plunged the previously silent hall into deeper silence. Even the sound of breathing seemed to fade. How about letting him undergo the Terrigen mist first, and then we can discuss it? A woman from the chair on the right spoke up. As soon as the woman finished speaking, someone on her left jumped out. He's a bastard, unworthy of the mist. His Highness Alex must also be punished. His Highness Alex is a member of the royal family. Another person on the right stood up, refuting the other's words. Inhuman culture strictly forbids intermarriage between inhumans and other races, but interestingly, this restriction does not apply to royal families. Before the person on the right could finish, another stood up on the left, their tough face etched with undisguised disdain. He's of the lower caste. The Inhumans, isolated from the rest of the world, possessed advanced technology surpassing that of humans, yet they developed a rigid caste-based social system. An Inhuman's social status was determined by their abilities after being infected with the Terrigen mist. Once designated, no Inhuman, no matter how great or powerful, could ever change their position within this hierarchical society. No more talk about Alex, the old man on the throne barked, silencing all the other voices as the argument intensified. Now, what should we do with this little Alex? Immediate execution, came the response from the person on the left, cold, firm, and resolute. Divine mist mutagenesis, came the response from the person on the right, a pointed retort. Seeing the two sides about to argue again, the old man on the throne couldn't help but feel a headache. As the king of the Inhuman royal family, he naturally wanted to favor his family, but those on his left were members of the Genetic Council, their power no less than that of the Inhuman king himself. After a long moment of contemplation, the alien king proposed a plan that wasn't really a solution. Both sides should make concessions and let little Alex undergo the divine mist mutagenesis first. As soon as he finished speaking, the Gene Council members immediately started to make a commotion. The alien king quickly continued, after the mutagenesis, we'll see what their abilities are. If they're of a lower caste, they'll be put to death. What do you think? This compromise was quickly agreed upon by both parties. Watching the people at the fetal care center on his right preparing to initiate the divine mist mutagenesis, the alien king couldn't help but pray inwardly, little Alex, I hope your abilities will allow you to survive. Chapter 153, Divine Mist Mutation. The mist of Terrigen is a magical mist created by the Terrigen crystals hidden deep beneath Atlan. This mist can cause Inhumans to undergo bizarre mutations, granting them a wide variety of supernatural powers. As the very foundation of the Inhumans, the mist is fiercely guarded, and no one, not even the Inhuman king, can approach without permission. Following the meeting of the Inhuman triumvirate, Alex was taken to a secluded location to undergo the mutagenesis process. On the day Alex officially underwent the mutagenesis, the triumvirate gathered again, including His Highness Alex, who bore a striking resemblance to Alex. Is this my child? His Highness Alex, looking at Alex still lying in the mutagenesis chamber, stumbled over, crouched beside him, and examined him closely. His right hand trembled as he reached toward Alex's face, tears streaming down his face. After staring for a moment, Prince Alex suddenly turned to look at his brother, the alien king. Any news about his mother? The alien king was silent for a moment before speaking again. According to Colrond, she's dead. Prince Alex froze, then burst into tears again, repeating over and over again, I'm sorry for her, I'm sorry for her. Prince Alex, please don't interfere with our work. His wails grew louder, and several people unconsciously frowned, their eyes gleaming with contempt. Prince Alex, emotionally unstable, was stunned for a moment, then enraged, forgetting his lowly caste and on the verge of a curse. But the alien king was quick to silence him before he could say anything. Stop making trouble. This will only harm your son. The alien king's words instantly silenced Prince Alex. He ceased struggling and turned to look at Alex, his eyes filled with pity and regret. Begin, a cold voice echoed, and a faint blue mist suddenly emerged from the mutagenesis chamber. As soon as the blue mist touched Alex's body, it vanished instantly, as if absorbed directly by Alex. Within seconds, the chamber was empty, No trace of the blue mist remaining. What's going on? The Inhuman King looked startled, turning to look at the person in charge of the mutagenesis. The person also frowned, seemingly unsure of what was happening. After discussing with a few people around him, he began injecting Terrigen's divine mist into the chamber again. Just like the previous time, the blue Terrigen's divine mist appeared only to be absorbed by Alex's body a moment later. 3 injections of Terrigen's divine mist followed, each with the same exact scene. Everyone was stunned. This situation was unprecedented in Inhuman history. Should we continue? The person in charge hesitated, turning to look at the Inhuman King and the members of the Genetic Council. Without a moment's hesitation, and regardless of the opinions of the Genetic Council beside him, the Alien King said firmly, "Continue." To the Alien King's surprise, the Genetic Council not only did not object, but nodded in agreement. With both giants agreeing, the mutagenesis naturally continued. Half an hour later, Alex and the mutagenesis chamber remained the same, putting everyone in a dilemma. If they didn't continue, all the previous consumption would be wasted. If they continued, no one knew how much more Terrigen mist would be consumed. Alex was like an insatiable black hole, constantly devouring Terrigen mist. The mist he consumed alone was enough to mutate over 30 people. His Highness Alex looked at Alex with concern, then turned to look at the others around him. He knew what they were thinking, and even his brother was hesitating. After a moment's hesitation, His Highness Alex knelt on the spot, pleading, "Just one last try, please." Seeing his own brother kneeling before him in tears, the Inhuman King's heart ached. He turned to the others, asking, "Continue." This was a matter of the Inhuman race's very foundation. The Inhuman King couldn't act arbitrarily. "Please, just one last time." Trembling, His Highness Alex looked at the men who would decide his child's fate, his eyes filled with pleading. After a long silence, Terrigen's divine mist was injected into the mutagen chamber for the final time. A startling transformation occurred, before anyone could react. Upon contact with Alex's body, the blue mist didn't absorb him. Instead, it adhered to his form, gradually solidifying until it transformed into a thin layer of blue crystal, tightly enveloping him. Upon witnessing this transformation, His Highness Alex couldn't help but leap to his feet, weeping with joy. "It's done. It's done." After the Inhumans were mutated by Terrigen's divine mist, blue crystals like Alex's would condense within them, signifying the completion of the mutagenesis. The next step was to wait for a brand new Inhuman to be reborn from the blue crystals. This waiting process could take only a few hours, while others could take days. Finally, "It's done." The Inhuman King and the others breathed a sigh of relief, their gazes towards Alex filled with a hint of anticipation. Having absorbed so much divine mist, the resulting mutation would surely yield exceptionally powerful abilities. Meanwhile, a sudden and drastic change unfolded in the Savage Lands. Strucker suddenly arrived with tens of thousands of AIM agents, swiftly occupying the ruined Posidonia and then, with unwavering speed, seizing control of all the remaining cities of the Atlantean descendants. When Emma regained consciousness, she discovered that the entire plains of the Savage Lands had become AIM territory. "First, I'll reflect on this," Howard explained softly, looking at Emma, who was about to explode with shame. "I didn't pay close attention to the holographic console sooner." Emma suppressed her anger, turned to Howard, and said softly, "Howard, this isn't your fault. The holographic console could only control the forest and swamp on this side. The plains were completely blocked, making even observation difficult, let alone control and modification. Let's talk about what to do next." Nick Fury had remained on the floating island since Alex left, originally planning to leave the next day, but he hadn't expected something like this. "Strucker's coming with bad intentions. I'm afraid he's prepared. Strucker is here, so I'm not too worried." Emma placed her hands on her forehead, gently rubbing her temples, and said with a look of worry, "I'm worried that Tarsem will show up again." Emma's words made everyone's face drop. "Alex and the alien killer Colrand have both left. I'm afraid there is really no one on Earth who can suppress the terrifying Tarsem." Chapter 154, Changes in the Wilderness. "Nick, can we contact that Colrand?" Howard, not wanting the Savage Land to be destroyed, thought of Tarsem's power and quickly turned to Nick Fury. Sensing the anticipation in Howard's eyes, Nick Fury could only offer a wry smile. Emma happened to look up and saw the wry smile on Nick Fury's face. She sighed helplessly, but no words came out. "Tarsem is certainly powerful, but he's only one man after all. Seeing Howard and Emma's dejected expressions, Nick Fury couldn't help but offer a soothing word. If one man can't do it, we can send 100. If 100 still can't, then 1,000. Even a pile of them will kill him. It was a solution, but the casualties would be enormous, terrifyingly high. The problem was that Tarsim's energy balls were incredibly powerful, practically nuclear warheads, instantly fatal on contact. Even a large number of people might not be effective. It was even possible that countless casualties would remain before Tarsim was defeated. Actually, there's no need to worry so much, Howard said, his previous worry suddenly gone, and he actually laughed. That Tarsim is an inhuman fugitive. Even if Corange doesn't return, they'll definitely send someone else. Hearing this, Nick Fury and Emma were stunned and speechless. Howard's words made sense. The only uncertainty was whether the Inhumans would show up in time. The three of them were discussing this when a man suddenly burst in, his face looking a little panicked. Seeing the man, Emma's heart skipped a beat. She had a bad feeling. This man had been placed at the border of the plains, and his appearance now meant something had probably happened there. Taking a deep breath, Emma suppressed the panic in her heart and asked calmly, "What happened?" "Tylenol." Tylenol took a few breaths, took out a letter from his body and handed it to Emma. "This was sent by the other side. Let me hand it to you personally." Emma took the letter with surprise, looked at it carefully, then opened it, and a strange look appeared on her face. "Stark, what does he mean by this?" As she spoke, Emma handed the letter in her hand to Howard and Nick. "He actually wants to form an alliance with us, which is really weird." The letter was sent by Stark, and the content of the letter was nothing special. It can be summed up in one sentence: "I want to form an alliance with you." Howard and Nick quickly read the letter, and their faces were equally confused. After a while, Nick Fury spoke first. "Emma, can someone take me back?" He paused, then pondered. "I think something big must have happened out there. Strucker's actions must have been influenced by it." "Okay, I'll arrange it," Emma nodded. Then, remembering the would-be X-Men Alex had sent away, she quickly pleaded, "I'd also like to ask Nick to help find some people Alex sent away. I'd like to bring them back. S.H.I.E.L.D. has a powerful intelligence system, so finding people should be easy." After losing Alex, Emma had decided to focus on developing the X-Men to protect the floating island and prepare for the impending war. She wasn't entirely convinced by Strucker's request for an alliance, suspecting it was a conspiracy. "If I have any information, I'll send it to X-Force," Nick Fury said before leaving. Within 2 hours, news of Nick Fury reached Emma through the mutants at X-Force. Howard stood nearby, reading the latest news. "I thought they were so powerful, but it turns out they've been forced here." Howard couldn't help but laugh as he read the news. It turned out that a conflict had broken out between Red Skull's Hydra and Strucker's AIM, ultimately resulting in the defeat of Strucker's AIM. Destitute and with nowhere to go, Strucker fled with everyone into the wilderness. Remarkably, Tarsim had joined Red Skull and become a member of Hydra. Emma wasn't as optimistic as Howard. While the threat of Tarsim was temporarily gone, having a tiger lurking nearby was a constant source of worry. Emma's biggest concern was AIM's vast technological prowess. If they inherited the alien technology from the lands of the Atlantean descendants, it would be a disaster. When Emma expressed her concerns, Howard fell into deep thought. The savage lands were undoubtedly the product of alien technology. The giant floating island and the entire floating temple were pinnacles of technology. However, numerous remnants of alien technology, particularly weaponry, remained on the savage lands plains. With the scientific expertise of AIM's tech geeks, they had a great chance of unlocking the secrets of this alien technology. "Looks like we have no choice but to fight," Howard uttered, his brow furrowed. While they still had a slight advantage, the mutants must strike first. Emma understood this and nodded, effectively accepting the situation. That night, Emma, accompanied by 1,000 carefully selected mutants, quietly infiltrated the plains under cover of darkness. These 1,000 had once been candidates for the X-Men, rejected by Emma in subsequent rounds of selection. Despite their rejection, their abilities should not be underestimated. Many were as capable as the 100 aspiring X-Men. "Today, you have only one mission." Standing outside the border city closest to the forest, Emma swept a cold gaze over everyone present, her tone colder than ever. "That's to capture people. All the humans in the city, all of them." Initially, Emma had considered killing them all. After much deliberation, she ultimately opted for capture. "Dean, where are the Atlanteans?" Someone raised their hand and asked. Emma hesitated for a moment, then said aloud, "Don't worry about them. They're a bunch of useless people." Emma's contempt for the Atlanteans grew. She described them as cowardly, unmotivated, and lacking ambition. Every derogatory term could be applied to them. It was truly bizarre that the vastly more populous Atlanteans could be controlled and ruled by AIM, a vastly smaller group, in just a few days. With Emma's command, 1,000 men vanished into the night city in an instant. As the sky grew brighter, dawn broke over the city. The Atlanteans, now under human control, discovered with a startling surprise that the humans who had been watching over them had vanished, leaving no trace of them anywhere in the city. All of them had inexplicably fallen into a frenzy, abandoning even the most basic defenses. "What a bunch of scum." Emma could only describe the Atlanteans with the words Alex had once told her. Howard, standing at the holographic console, surveyed the scene of the small city, shaking his head in a quivering, "What a strange bunch of creatures. From now on, I'll strive for 2 more chapters." Chapter 155 Bad News. To hear more of your voices and receive more of your suggestions, search and follow the Wetchet official account Dread now to support Marvel Mind Transporter. For several days, under Emma's leadership, the X-Men swept through cities with unstoppable force. Without exception, upon learning of the disappearance of humanity, all the descendants of Atlantis lost themselves in ecstasy, naively believing that the humans who had ruled them for so long would never return. Within a single day, the descendants of Atlantis had returned to their former lives of luxury and comfort, completely oblivious to the suffering of the previous few days. The Atlanteans are completely unreliable. I think you should send someone to control these cities. Howard, seeing the Atlanteans on the holographic console appearing to be oblivious to the situation, was completely disappointed. He turned to Emma beside him. "Otherwise, if AIM launches a surprise attack, all the equipment we've left behind could be destroyed." Provoking AIM was, on the one hand, a way to teach them a lesson, but also an opportunity to install equipment in the plain cities, allowing the holographic consoles in the floating temple to truly control these areas. Of course, this was premature, for now, the only way to observe these cities in real time was through the holographic consoles. Emma smiled wryly and shook her head, her expression filled with resignation. Mutants have always had 2 extremes, either the intelligent, dedicated to scientific research, or the foolish, only capable of fighting. Because most mutants have unusual appearances, their inferiority complex, and the discrimination they face from humans make it difficult for them to integrate into the human world. Consequently, their education levels are generally low, and only a few mutants with normal appearances are immune to these challenges. The situation didn't improve until the founding of the X Academy in the Savage Lands. But the time was short, and expecting them to help manage a city proved challenging. Seeing the unease in Emma's eyes, Howard shook his head and chuckled, saying, "It's not as complicated as you think. If all else fails, just declare martial law. Don't worry about anything else. Just keep an eye on them." Emma hesitated for a moment before nodding. "Let's wait. Now is not the time. Do you have any other plans?" Howard's heart raced, realizing Emma must have other plans. He glanced at her with a puzzled expression. "It's unwise to confront AIM head-on right now. I want to use these sneak attacks to slowly wear them down." The X-Men's small number was a disadvantage, and a large army would be far less effective. However, with their swift movements and uncanny abilities, they were undoubtedly adept at stealth attacks. However, to everyone's surprise, after several days, Strucker remained completely silent, and the city recaptured by the X-Men remained in the hands of the glamorous descendants of Atlantis. Unexpectedly, Emma was terribly anxious. She paced back and forth in the floating temple, repeating, "What the hell is going on, Emma? You're making me dizzy." Howard consoled her, turning to look at the holographic console, his expression as calm as ever. Emma stopped walking, her expression growing more serious. Strucker must be plotting something. Howard, in fact, shared the same thought. He glanced back at the holographic console and said gravely, "We don't know what it is yet. I'll go check on Nick, he might have some information." Watching Howard's fading figure, Emma fell into deep thought. After a moment, she muttered, "We should have our own intelligence network?" Having to rely on SHIELD twice in a row had made Emma realize the mutants' significant shortcomings in this area. Howard and Nick Fury were both good people. They had no ill intentions towards Alex or the mutants themselves, but there was no guarantee others would. To avoid being controlled by others, it's time for mutants to establish their own intelligence network. While Emma was contemplating the process of establishing their own mutant intelligence network, at the Fetal Care Center in Atlan, His Highness Alex wearily opened his eyes. After days of sleeplessness, he finally fell asleep yesterday. Upon waking, His Highness Alex first glanced at the nearby mutagenesis chamber. Within the transparent chamber lay a figure encased in blue crystals. It was none other than Alex. 13 days, seeing the crystals show no signs of shattering, His Highness couldn't help but smile. Terragang's divine mist mutagenesis requires a slow mutation process, especially during this final waiting period. The longer the wait, the stronger the resulting abilities. In the rigidly hierarchical and human race, the stronger the mutant's abilities, the higher the chance of achieving status within the ranks. 13 days is already very close to the top. Meanwhile, Howard once again found Nick Fury. Seeing Howard, Nick Fury raised his head from the mountain of documents and asked casually, "What's going on over there?" "Not very good." Howard pursed his lips and frowned slightly. Emma took the initiative to attack AIM, but there has been no movement from AIM in the past few days. "It's so weird that it makes people uneasy." "It's indeed a bit weird," Nick Fury exclaimed in surprise, then reached out from the pile of documents beside him, picked out a few papers, and threw them to Howard. "Take a look." Howard didn't expect that he would really gain something this time. He took the document excitedly, read a few pages, and looked up at Nick Fury with surprise on his face. "What do you mean?" The document contained the mission records of SHIELD agents. The strange thing was that many of them ended in failure, and the reasons for the failure were inexplicable. It seemed that even the agents on the mission didn't understand the reasons for the failure. "Recently, our agents have frequently failed missions, and even suffered casualties," Nick Fury said, his facial muscles unconsciously twisted together, with a hint of ferocity. "I suspect a new force has emerged." After a pause, Nick Fury's eyes suddenly became sharp, and his expression became very serious. "And this force is most likely composed of mutants from Sebastian Shaw's lineage, aren't they all?" Howard thought of the mutants imprisoned in the observation room in the Savage Land. Nick Fury also took a look. Howard knew what he was about to say the moment he opened his mouth and interrupted him before he could finish. "Those are just the majority of Sebastian Shaw's men. A few escaped, that's for sure." Howard paused for a moment, then suddenly realized what was happening. His face changed dramatically and he stood up abruptly. "Nick, what do you mean?" "Actually, even if you hadn't come today, I would have told you this news." Nick Fury nodded, his face calmly speaking. "AIM's strange reaction is very likely related to them. Are they targeting the observation room?" Howard's heart skipped a beat, and he thought again of the mutants imprisoned in the observation room. Nick Fury nodded, as if he had already guessed it. "It's very likely that they need to expand their power, and they're determined to capture those people. They're in trouble this time." Howard couldn't help but laugh at the thought of the blow they might face. Having spent so much time at Academy X, Howard was well aware of its power. If they dared to intrude, they would most likely be wiped out. My novel Marvel Mind Transporter will have more fresh content on the official widget platform, and there will also be a 100% lucky draw gift for everyone. Open widget now, click the plus sign add friends in the upper right corner, search for the official account Dread and follow it. Hurry up! If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 156 Chaos in the Observation Room. "Don't be so confident," Nick Fury warned sternly, hearing Howard's laughter. "They're Sebastian Shaw's direct descendants, and their strength shouldn't be underestimated." Howard's laughter died down. Having experienced so many mishaps, he understood the truth. There's always someone stronger than the strongest. After a moment's hesitation, he stood up and said goodbye. "In that case, I'll go back and let them know. If you need anything, just ask." Knowing the urgency of the situation, Nick Fury didn't try to stop him. Leaving SHIELD, Howard hurried back to X-Film, where the portal connecting the Savage Lands to New York had been set up. As soon as Howard entered X-Film, he was surrounded by three women, Vivian Lee, Audrey Henrietta, and Marilyn Monroe. The three women still didn't know about the events in the Savage Land and Alex. They'd been busy filming a movie, and when they finally got a break, they noticed something was amiss at X-Film. They happened to run into Howard and immediately grabbed him, asking, "Howard, did something happen over there?" Howard hesitated, then extended his hand and said, "Come back with me. If you have anything, ask Emma." Howard didn't dare tell them about Alex's accident. Who knew what they would do? So, he decided to let Emma handle it. When the four of them returned to the Savage Land through the portal, Howard led the three women straight to Emma. "Let's not talk about anything else for now. I have something important to tell you," Howard said before the three women began, worried he wouldn't have time to get down to business. "I heard from Nick that Sebastian Shaw's men have reappeared, and they seem to be trying to rescue him." With that, Howard left the four women and disappeared. Emma was stunned for a few seconds, then snapped back to her senses. Without time to bother with Vivian and the other two, she sprinted out of the floating temple and headed for Academy X. The X-Men had siphoned off some of their personnel from Academy X, and more from the perimeter defenses. The remaining personnel at Academy X weren't many, and none were particularly strong. Women's intuition was often quite accurate. Vivian and the other two clearly sensed something was amiss. Seeing Howard and Emma's strange reactions, they panicked even more and ran after Emma. However, the three women were ordinary people, no way they could outrun Emma, and they soon lost her. Looking at the deserted streets, Monroe pouted at Vivian. "What do we do now?" Vivian glanced around anxiously, her panic growing. Suddenly, an idea struck her. Howard just said someone's going to rescue Sebastian Shaw. Emma must have gone to the observation room. With that thought, Vivian took off and ran towards Academy X. Having spent months filming in the wilderness, Vivian Lee was well versed in the floating island. The three women had only just begun their run when they unexpectedly ran into Emma, heading in the opposite direction. "Emma, why are you back again?" Audrey exclaimed in surprise when Emma didn't even glance at them. "We really need to go to the observation room to find you." Emma paused as she ran, then turned around, her eyes fluttering as she spoke. "I'm looking for you. It's not safe here now. Find a safe place to hide." "Emma, tell me, what happened?" Vivian Lee frantically replied, her intuition telling her something serious had happened in the wilderness. "What happened to Sebastian Shaw? How did anyone come to save him?" Emma's barrage of questions seemed to leave her bewildered. After a pause, she finally spoke. "Okay, let's go to the observation room together. I'll tell you when we get there." Not long after, the four women arrived. Surprisingly, the usually deserted observation area was now crowded with people, each with a nervous expression. "What happened?" Vivian Lee asked countless times along the way. As they neared the observation room, she couldn't help but ask again, "We're here, you can finally tell me." Through the crowd outside the observation area, they could vaguely see the mutants held in the observation rooms inside. Seeing these people, Emma's eyes flickered. After a moment's hesitation, she said, "AIM and the Hellfire Club have joined forces to attack us. War could break out at any moment." Emma's words startled Vivian Lee and the other two girls. They had all experienced World War II and the subsequent war between humans and mutants. The brutality of war filled them with disgust and fear. "Dean, why are you back again?" Seeing Emma, a middle-aged man in the crowd approached, a hint of confusion on his tough face. Dean, Emma had just left, so why was she back with Vivian Lee and the others? Emma looked at the middle-aged man with a serious expression and said softly, "I'm still worried. Come over and take another look." "Don't worry, Dean. I'm here to make sure nothing happens." The middle-aged man patted his chest and said arrogantly. He didn't stop the four women, allowing them to enter. A hidden smile flashed across Emma's beautiful face, and she led Vivian Lee and the other two women slowly into the observation area. Looking at the people detained in the observation room, Emma couldn't help but reveal a hint of excitement in the depths of her eyes. Vivian Lee casually looked around at the densely packed observation rooms and suddenly realized that she had never seen any sign of Alex. She couldn't help but wonder, "Emma, where is Alex? Why haven't I seen him all this time?" Emma's attention was completely focused on the surrounding observation rooms, as if she were genuinely checking security. Hearing Vivian's question, she casually replied, "Alex is busy dealing with AIM and the Hellfire Club." Unconsciously, the two of them had covered most of the observation room, gradually heading towards where Sebastian Shaw and other important figures were being held. Seeing the observation room where Sebastian Shaw was being held not far away, Emma's eyes lit up with excitement, though Vivian and the other two girls didn't notice. Taking advantage of the girls' moment of relaxation, Emma suddenly attacked, punching and kicking Vivian and the other two to the ground. Then, Blue scales suddenly erupted from Emma's body, and in an instant, she transformed into a monstrous being covered in them. Looking at the three beauties sprawled on the ground, Emma muttered quietly, "I wonder who that Alex is? He's so lucky." With that, the blue-scaled figure scurried to the observation room where Sebastian Shaw was being held. As he began to open the door, he quickly explained, "Dark King, I'm Raven, and I've been ordered by the Black Queen to rescue you." Raven quickly opened the door and reached out to help Sebastian Shaw up, but halfway through, she realized something was wrong and stepped back. Quick reactions. With a chuckle, Sebastian Shaw in the observation room transformed into someone else. Like flowing water. Seeing the person suddenly transformed, Raven's face changed drastically. Without thinking, she turned around and rushed to the three Vivian Lee girls lying on the ground. She reached out and picked up the petite Audrey, and grabbed her neck with one hand. "Don't move, or I will kill her immediately." My novel Marvel Mind Transporter will have more fresh content on the official widget platform, and there will also be a 100% lucky draw for everyone. Open widget now, click the plus sign in the upper right corner to add friends, search for the official account Dread and follow it. Hurry up. Chapter 157 Calm Waters. Seeing Audrey held captive in Raven's arms, the fake Sebastian Shaw, who had just been so smug, suddenly panicked. He knew Audrey and knew something about her relationship with Alex, and he dared not let her come to harm. Let her go. Just as the fake Sebastian Shaw hesitated, a cold voice rang out. Turning, he saw Emma, leading a dozen men, approaching swiftly. Emma's pretty face was shrouded in fear, her white cape fluttering behind her, a murderous aura. Seeing Emma's appearance, Raven remained unfazed. Her left hand tightened slightly around Audrey's neck, her blue face filled with ferocity. "Release Sebastian Shaw immediately, or I will kill her. Since you're seeking death, you can't blame me," Emma snorted, her eyes narrowing. Her telepathic power surged through Raven's defenses like a whirlwind. Before Raven could react, she felt a wave of dizziness. Knowing something was wrong, she was about to exert force with her left hand when her vision went dark and she passed out. "Take them down. I want all the news in an hour." Emma glanced over at someone behind her. Then, she had someone pick up Vivian and the other two girls and left the observation room. 10 minutes later, in the floating temple, Vivian and the other two girls woke up one after another. "What happened?" Monroe rubbed her head, looking around. "How did we get here?" Audrey rubbed her neck in pain, her face wrinkled. "It hurts, it feels like someone's pinching me." "Now that you're awake, get back to New York. It's not safe here." Emma sat on a chair nearby, watching the three girls wake up before standing up and speaking calmly. What happened just now? Before Vivian Lee passed out, she vaguely remembered that it was Emma who hid her. Her eyes were full of anger when she looked at Emma. "Why did you knock us out?" Emma was stunned when she heard this, shook her head with a wry smile, and explained the matter of the fake Emma. "You were all deceived, and there was someone else who knocked you out." Then is what she said true or false? Vivian Lee frowned and temporarily believed what Emma said. Did AIM and the Hellfire Club really join forces to attack us? It's true, they have indeed joined forces. This raid on the observation room was to rescue the Hellfire Club mutants imprisoned there. Emma did not hide it, and did not forget to persuade them to leave. "So, it will be very dangerous for you to stay here. Where's your brother?" Audrey rubbed her neck and said sadly, "We were all beaten. Why didn't he come to see us?" Emma's whole body shook, and a liquid immediately rushed to her eyes, as if it would burst out at any time. Barely suppressing the urge to cry, Emma whispered, "Alex is busy right now. He really doesn't have time to see you." Telling the three girls about Alex would be pointless and would only make them worry, so it was better not to say anything. "Can we go see our brother?" It had been so long since they had seen Alex, and the girls missed him terribly. Seeing that Alex had no time to visit them, Monroe thought about going to see him. "It's the war front there, and you'll only distract Alex." Emma, of course, disagreed, making a serious excuse. "If you really care about Alex, don't bother him. Go back to New York and help him develop X-Film. That's the greatest love you can give him." Ultimately, under Emma's persuasion, Vivian and the other girls returned to New York without receiving anything, and continued to manage X-Film. As the three girls left, Howard appeared from nowhere, his face a look of disappointment, as if he hadn't seen the show. "Why don't you tell them the truth?" Emma sighed, gazing at the distant horizon. "Wouldn't it be nice to give them some peace of mind? Hopefully, they won't bother you then." Howard shrugged, non-committal. Emma didn't dwell on the issue any further. Thinking of the girl with the miraculous ability to transform, she asked, "By the way, how did the interrogation of Raven go?" "She knows nothing. Those mutants from the Hellfire Club haven't shared any secrets with her." Howard's expression suddenly grew serious as he spoke. "They tricked her with just a few words, like brainwashing her. She's now wholeheartedly working for them." Emma raised an eyebrow, a hint of doubt. "Are you sure?" 10 telepaths searched her memories, and they found the exact same memory, with no signs of modification or deletion. Thanks to Emma, Academy X has a large number of telepaths and the most in-depth research on telepathy. Interrogating a young girl is no problem for them. Strengthen the defenses of the observation room. They won't give up just yet." Emma's face was bitter. She turned to Howard with a pleading look. "Howard, could you please help strengthen the defenses in the observation room area? It's too large, and I'm afraid we mutants won't be able to handle it all." Howard pondered for a moment, then nodded in agreement. For several days, the savage lands remained peaceful, with the X-Men continuously attacking. By now, most cities in the plains had been liberated by the X-Men, with only a few coastal cities and Posidonia still under AIM control. As for the mutants from the Hellfire Club, they hadn't even been seen once. A little girl had once run into the observation room and made a scene, but nothing was heard of her since. What on earth are they planning? Em returned to the observation room, casually surveying the imprisoned mutants, her thoughts swirling, yet she couldn't make any sense. "Tessa, what do you think they were planning?" "Without a doubt, they're definitely planning on these people," the woman beside Emma spoke up. Her neutral attire exuded a dash of charisma, and next to the voluptuous Emma, she displayed a unique beauty. Tessa, codenamed Sage, was a former member of the Hellfire Club. After being held captive for a while, she surrendered. Emma valued her computer-like brain, the ability to rapidly process vast amounts of information, and the ability to perceive mutant characteristics. She was now her second-in-command, a role she diligently cultivated. Then why haven't they made any move yet? Emma glanced at the woman, her face still filled with confusion. Could it be that a single failure has frightened them? Tessa shook her head expressionlessly, her eyes fixed deeply ahead, as if she were lost in thought. After a moment, she spoke. "They must be hatching a larger plan. All we can do now is strengthen our defenses and wait for their arrival." "That's too passive." Emma disliked this feeling. She would rather resolve all the problems before they arrive. A flicker of helplessness flashed in Tessa's eyes. She smiled wryly and shook her head. "It can't be helped. The enemy is in the dark, I'm in the light. This is the only way." My novel, Marvel Teleporter, will have more new content on the official Widget platform, along with a 100% chance of a lucky draw. Open Widget now. Click the plus sign in the top right to add friends, search for the official account Dread, and follow it. Hurry. Chapter 158 Undercurrent. Time slipped by unnoticed as Emma waited anxiously. The entire Savage Plains region had been liberated by the X-Men, and the descendants of Atlantis were once again the masters of the plains. The once threatening Strucker and AIM seemed to have vanished from the face of the earth. The X-Men searched the entire plains, but could find no trace of them. "Howard, any news from SHIELD?" Standing in front of the holographic console, Emma's expression was more serious than ever. The disappearance of AIM members had left her extremely nervous, even a little terrified. Howard shook his head, his expression equally grim. "It's calm outside, nothing unusual has happened. If only Alex were here." Emma crouched on the ground, her face grim, her head in her hands, crying out in agony. Although Alex was often quite lazy and preferred to be hands-off, when he was truly needed, he would unleash his full energy and do his best. At this moment, Emma was clueless and truly wished Alex were there to offer her some advice. "Alex," Tessa, standing nearby, suddenly exclaimed, a look of sudden realization on her face. Emma and Howard exchanged glances, then turned to look at Tessa, somewhat puzzled by her sudden reaction. Tessa smiled mysteriously, looking at the two and explaining, "I think the reason they haven't made any move yet is probably because of Alex." "Alex?" Emma's mind raced, a sudden realization dawning. "You mean they're frightened by Alex and afraid to act rashly?" Howard, no fool, immediately thought of the letter Strucker had sent earlier. So, Strucker's letter of alliance must be genuine, whether true or not. At least he didn't want to antagonize us at the time. Although Tessa had only been Emma's assistant for a short time, she knew all the answers. "So, they haven't made any move since we sent the X-Men." Emma thought about it, and it seemed to make sense. Strucker's aggressive march into the Savage Land must have been forced by Hydra and the fake Red Skull. The Hellfire Club's mutant stance, however, seemed a bit odd. We must find Alex as soon as possible, otherwise if we wait too long, they'll still attack us. Tessa didn't know Alex's specific situation, only that he was traveling outside. I'm afraid they've already begun to suspect us. That Driven was probably just a test. As he spoke, Tessa suddenly became excited, and his expression became extremely grim. There must be one of their people on the floating island. This person has been watching us. Emma vaguely realized something, but Howard was a little slow to react at first. What do you mean? We must find Alex. Tessa looked at Emma seriously. Only if he appears now can we deter them. Emma smiled bitterly and shook her head, turning to look at Howard. Howard spread his hands and shrugged, his face full of helplessness. Tessa's superhuman brain was incredibly sharp, and she immediately noticed something strange between the two. Her heart skipped a beat, and thinking about how long she hadn't seen Alex, she immediately guessed something. Something happened to Alex. Emma thought for a moment, and no longer concealed anything, revealing the news about Alex. We haven't heard from him since that Colrin took him away, and Colrin has also disappeared. Tessa fell silent. This war was probably inevitable, unless Alex suddenly appeared. Atlan, Fetal Care Center. His Highness Alex stared blankly at the mutagen box before him, his eyes wide open. A hint of despair in his vacant eyes. On the 7th day of the mutation, His Highness Alex was filled with joy. On the 14th day, His Highness Alex was ecstatic. Such a long time had already set a new record for Inhumans. On the 21st day, His Highness Alex began to get nervous, and a sense of panic gradually grew. On the 30th day, despair gripped Alex's heart, slowly enveloping him like a cocoon, gradually tormenting his mind. "Child, I haven't even had time to look into your eyes." Alex suddenly regained consciousness, his unfocused eyes gradually gathering together, resting on Alex's tightly closed eyes in the crystal blue. Are they as alluring as hers, like black pearls? Tessa's prophecy seemed to come true. Within a few days, another group infiltrated the floating island. No one knew where they had emerged, suddenly appearing there. This group, numbering 27, caused immense chaos on the island, leaving many injured. Although the X-Men's relentless pursuit ultimately captured all 27, a sense of foreboding slowly settled over everyone's minds. 2 more attempts, at most, and they'll definitely launch a large-scale attack. Emma's face was utterly grim, and she let out a rare outburst of anger. "I just want to know how they got on the floating island." Emma pointed at the men in front of her, responsible for the island's defense and border security, and cursed, "Are you all idiots? You didn't even notice someone had entered my house. What's the point of keeping you around?" The officers hung their heads, letting Emma spit on them, but they were deeply frustrated. They believed their defenses were impenetrable, with a guard every 3 steps and a sentry every 5. Even a teleporter would be quickly spotted, not to mention a fly. However, the 27 mutants who had infiltrated the floating island had slapped them in the face. Scolding them is useless. Let's think about how to defend ourselves next time. After Emma had been slamming them for over 10 minutes, Howard finally spoke, a look of concern on his face. "We might find them this time, but we might not be sure about the next time." Howard's words made Emma stop. The leaders were filled with gratitude, yet also with bitterness, because they didn't know how to defend themselves. It seemed that no matter how they defended, the enemy would reach the floating island. Emma glanced at the leaders, feeling angry and anxious, yet helpless. She had personally selected these people and participated in the defense of the floating island and its borders. If they weren't up to par, Emma really didn't know what to do. Just as everyone was scowling, a flying dragon suddenly flew in from outside. Atop the enormous dragon sat a child, about 8 or 9 years old. Covered only in an animal skin, the child resembled Tarzan from Tarzan of the Apes, his whole body brimming with feral energy. "Why are you back?" Emma glanced at the man and dragon and angrily scolded them. "You've been away for so long, and you still think you can come back?" The man and dragon were none other than Logan's long-lost son, little Luo, and the little Charmander Kiki. The man and the dragon spent most of their time in the forest. At first, Emma was worried, but then, seeing how they'd become the forest's dominant force, she stopped caring and let them run wild. "Little mommy, look what this is." Little Luo jumped off Kiki's body, reaching out and pulling something out from his arms. He waved it around with a hint of pride on his young face. Everyone stood up in amazement at the object in Luo's hands, Because it looked so familiar to them, my novel, Marvel Mind Transporter, will have more new content on the official Widget platform, along with a 100% chance of winning a prize. Open Widget now, click the plus sign in the top right corner to add friend, search for the official account Dread, and follow it. Hurry! Chapter 159 Startled. Despite his tall and sturdy appearance, little Rollo wasn't even 4 years old. Ever since Alex brought him home, he'd been constantly at Emma's side, making Emma his natural little mother. Inheriting Logan's talents, Rollo had grown incredibly quickly, his intelligence surpassing even that of an average adult. Seeing the expressions on everyone's faces, Rollo beamed with pride. Little mother, have I done something great? My little Rollo is the best. Emma scooped him up and gave him a hearty kiss on the cheek, overcome with emotion. Howard took the object from Rollo's hand, fiddling with it as he asked, Rollo, where did you find this energy gun? In the forest, indeed. Rollo had brought back an energy gun, a standard Hydra-issued energy gun used by Hydra during World War II and, afterward, by the Hellfire Club, led by Sebastian Shaw, during the war between humans and mutants. The appearance of an energy gun like this in the wilderness must have been left behind by the missing mutants from AIM and the Hellfire Club. Little Luo broke free from Emma's arms and quickly snatched the gun from Howard's hands, saying seriously, this gun is my trophy. It's mine, it's yours. It's yours. Emma couldn't wait to know the exact information. As she stuffed the gun into little Luo's arms, she hurriedly asked, Little Luo, tell me where you got this gun. The swamp. Little Luo carefully slung the energy gun on his back, looking around at everyone with his head held high, his light eyebrows wrinkled cutely. I've been searching there for a long time, but I can't find any trace of them. So, I suspect Dave sneaked into the Great Lake through the swamp. The Great Lake is the huge lake beneath a floating giant island, and the water system of the swamp is connected to the Great Lake. After a moment's thought, Emma confirmed Zioluoluo's suspicions. She leaped to her feet, turning to glare at the guards. Their heads shrank at Emma's glare, their faces flushing red as monkeys' buttocks. They had barely posted a proper guard in the swamp. Send someone immediately. Find them. Emma suppressed her fury and practically shouted her orders. The officers fled the floating temple. But less than a minute later, they returned in a group, their faces etched with panic. Watching them return, Emma frowned and angrily chided, Why are you back again? Did you find them, Dean? Someone broke into the observation room. What? Emma suddenly stood up, her expression grim. Didn't I tell you to strengthen the defense? How did someone get in? As she spoke, Emma sprinted out of the floating temple, heading for Academy X, followed closely by Howard and the others. When Emma and her group arrived at the observation area, they heard the sounds of intense fighting from afar. Stay here, Emma ordered Howard and little Luo to stay, then turned and rushed to the observation area at even greater speed. Although Howard longed to go in, he knew his own limitations and knew going would only cause more trouble, so he tactfully complied with Emma's orders. Little Luo, however, was not so obedient. With a whistle, he rode Charmander and gave chase. They soon arrived at the observation area. The entrance was blocked by many students. Inside, two groups could be seen engaged in a fierce battle. Seeing Emma approach, many people consciously made way, and Emma quickly reached the front. A quick glance revealed that while many people had been released, key figures like Sebastian Shaw were not among them. Emma had already moved these people elsewhere, including Eric and the real Red Skull. What's going on? How did they get in? Passing over the familiar faces, Emma quickly identified the people who had rushed in. There were at least a dozen of them. The person standing next to Emma explained awkwardly, one of them can turn invisible and sneak in. We didn't notice until they showed up to save people. Oh, they have that ability. Emma was surprised, turning to Tessa beside her. Can you find out who it is? Tessa had many abilities, all very useful, and her ability to perceive mutations was just one of them. Emma found this mass invisibility very useful and planned to find the person and save it for Alex. Found it, Tessa quickly locked onto the target, pointing to a young man in flashy attire. But his ability isn't mass invisibility. To be more precise, it's dimensional movement, which is even more powerful than invisibility. Upon hearing Tessa's words, someone rushed forward and quickly captured them, of course, thanks to Emma's help. Without Emma's telepathic control of the young man, he would have already slipped into the dimension. A dozen or so people, plus the 100 or so they'd rescued, were no match for the enemy. They were all captured in no time, not a single one escaping. Xiao Lualua repeatedly attempted to charge in for a fight, but was restrained by Emma. Seeing the battle so quickly over, he curled his lips in disdain. Such a weakling, simply running here to die. The speaker may not mean anything, but the listener may take it personally. Emma and Tessa's eyes flickered as they heard Xiao Lualua's complaints. From Riven at first to the dozen or so people now, even though the numbers were growing, it was clear that Guangping and his men couldn't save the people in the observation room. Yet they continued to send people in, clearly with other motives. Tessa, do you think that place is safe? Emma secretly communicated with Tessa telepathically. There were countless undercover agents hiding throughout the floating island, so some things were better left unsaid. Tessa hesitated for a moment, then nodded and said, "That's probably the safest place on the entire floating island." As he spoke, a sudden loud noise echoed from outside. Emma and Tessa exchanged glances and quickly rushed out. The first thing they saw was the slowly tilting spire of the floating temple, nestled in the center of the floating island. "Not good," Emma and Tessa cried out in unison, dashing back toward the floating temple. After a few steps, they reminded the guards in the observation room, "Keep an eye on this place. If anyone escapes, you'll be held responsible." The novel Marvel Mind Transporter will have more new content on the official WeChat platform, along with a 100% chance of winning a prize. Open WeChat now, click the plus sign in the top right to add friend, search for the official account Dread, and follow it. Hurry. Chapter 160 The War Begins. Leaving a few people to help guard the observation room, Emma called out and led hundreds of people towards the floating temple. "This is bad news. We should call back the X-Men immediately." Tessa ran behind Emma, communicating telepathically. "If they escape, we're in trouble." Those held in the critical detention center were all very important figures from various organizations. If they escaped, the wilderness would be in turmoil, if nothing else. "Don't worry, they're already heading back," Emma nodded calmly, echoing, "No matter what, I won't let them escape." As they spoke, a group of people arrived outside the floating temple. The towering tower had collapsed, crushing several nearby houses. The floating temple was reduced to rubble. A dozen people stood atop the ruins, looking at Emma and her group with a calm demeanor, seemingly oblivious to the hundreds of people she led. "Sebastian Shaw?" Emma gritted her teeth, her eyes blazing with anger as she gazed at one of them. Sebastian Shaw, now dressed in his new suit, bowed gracefully like a gentleman, a faint smile on his face. "Nice to meet you, Emma. Where's Alex? Why don't I see him?" Before Emma could reply, Sebastian Shaw spoke again. "After our last battle, I wanted to have a good fight with him," Emma snorted, her face filled with disdain. "You're a defeated opponent. Alex doesn't even bother to fight you. Family matters." Emma had a large group around her, but if they were to fight Sebastian Shaw and his men, their chances of success were slim. Eric alone would be enough to put them in a difficult position. Therefore, Emma was content to engage in verbal battles with Sebastian Shaw, stalling for time until the X-Men arrived. After several minutes of back and forth, Emma's mind grew increasingly uncertain. Why hadn't the X-Men returned yet? The X-Men must have been held up. Tessa, who had clearly noticed something was amiss, cautiously communicated with Emma telepathically. They clearly had this plan in mind. But what puzzles me is why they didn't just flee when the opportunity presented itself. Stalling here, Emma's brow furrowed slightly, and as she stared at Sebastian Shaw, who remained calm, a sudden surge of panic seized her. "Any news from the observation room?" "I've been keeping an eye on it." Tessa's face was filled with confusion. "No, it's quiet over there." "Nothing." "Oh no. Something's happened in the observation room," Emma cried out in alarm. Sebastian Shaw and the others in the ruins heard and laughed. One of the women, a sexy, scantily clad brunette, said sarcastically, "Shaw, I don't think this Miss Emma is anything more than that." "Selene, don't underestimate Miss Emma." Hearing the brunette's words, Sebastian Shaw, standing nearby, spoke again, his face serious and his tone solemn. However, to Emma, Sebastian Shaw's demeanor seemed more like a mockery of herself, and his gaze towards the others was filled with anger. The dozen or so people who had stormed the observation room with such suicidal intent did indeed have another goal, to lure Emma and the others out of the floating temple. Then, they would seize the opportunity to destroy the temple and rescue Sebastian Shaw. This was the first step of the plan. The second step, in the first step, was that more than a dozen people had actually entered the observation room. There were likely more. After Sebastian Shaw escaped and Emma was restrained, these people would attack again. rescuing everyone in the observation room. Of course, there were undoubtedly others outside, trapping or holding the X-Men. Otherwise, if the X-Men arrived in time, neither group might be able to escape. Emma pondered their plan briefly, but the only thing she couldn't figure out was how they knew Sebastian Shaw and his men were being held captive in the floating temple. After all, this secret was known only to a select few. As she pondered this, a thought struck Emma. She turned and looked around, where Tessa was. Turning again, Tessa was standing next to Sebastian Shaw. "Tessa, you?" Emma's face flushed with rage, and she pointed at Tessa, speechless for a long moment. Tessa smiled faintly, then took a step closer to Sebastian Shaw, demonstrating her choice with her actions. "You wicked woman. I still like you." Suddenly, a childish voice rang out. Little Rollo, riding his Charmander, Kiki, flew over the crowd, pointing at Tessa and unleashing a barrage of curses. If Kiki hadn't stopped her, little Rollo would have nearly rushed over to Tessa. Everyone was stunned by the sudden appearance of the man and dragon. Tessa, standing next to Sebastian Shaw, had a strange look in her eyes before snorting with disdain, as if she didn't bother to talk. Emma, watching Xiaoluoluo suddenly dash out, was stunned. She stole a glance across, a faint smile flickering in her eyes as she ordered icily, "Kiki, get Xiaoluoluo out of here." Xiaoluoluo, though extremely reluctant, had no choice but to be carried away by Kiki. Only after Xiaoluoluo had departed did Emma turn back to Sebastian Shaw and the others, her expression growing even more sullen. "None of you will leave here today," Emma's words uttered as she charged at Tessa, her murderous intent undisguised. Seeing this, the others didn't hesitate and immediately rushed towards Sebastian Shaw and the others. Though these men outnumbered Sebastian Shaw tenfold, their true combat effectiveness was far inferior. A tornado's power was even more potent, unleashing a murderous aura of massed combat. A massive tornado instantly formed, sweeping everyone in. Few could withstand its force. Eric, taking advantage of the wind, launched a few improvised iron bullets, inflicting continuous wounds within the tornado. Periodically, a long, conspicuous streak of blood streaked through the vast tornado. On the ruined ground, Emma seemed oblivious to the others, locked in a fierce struggle with Tessa, seemingly unable to vent her anger at being betrayed unless she killed her. However, their abilities were similar, and their shared telepathy proved ineffective against each other. Ultimately, they resorted to physical combat, back and forth punches and kicks, a fairly evenly matched exchange. "Everyone's been rescued. Don't fight." Sebastian Shaw, after knocking back a charging power mutant, turned and glanced around, shouting, "Retreat." Now that the people in the observation room had been rescued, there was no point in staying. "Let's get out." After all, the floating island held 500,000 mutants. If all of them joined the encirclement, Sebastian Shaw wouldn't be able to escape. In the center of the battlefield, Emma and Tessa exchanged glances, a fleeting smile crossing their faces. Immediately, Emma, with a burst of powerful force, struck Tessa in the shoulder, sending her spewing blood and sending her flying backward. Sebastian Shaw reached out and scooped up the unconscious Tessa. With a shout, he let everyone out of the floating island, disappearing into the depths of the plains in minutes. The novel Marvel Mind Transporter will have more new content on the official Watch It platform, along with a 100% chance of winning a prize. Open Watch It now, click the plus sign in the top right corner to add friend, search for the official account Dread, and follow it. Hurry, thanks to our book friend, Dread for the 588 reward. Thank you for your support. Chapter 161 Crystal. After Sebastian Shaw and his men left the floating island, Emma halted her pursuit, sending a few men along for show while she led the majority back to the now ruined floating temple. As Emma reached the temple, she spotted the young man guarding the observation room. Before she could speak, he knelt down, blaming himself profusely. "Dean, it's all my fault. I let them escape." Glancing at the young man, Emma couldn't find a single injury, not even a sign of a struggle. Frowning, she coldly asked, "What happened?" The young man, fearing a hidden cause, spilled everything. After a while, he himself had no idea what had happened. He fell asleep while standing, and when he awoke, the observation room was empty. Huh? Emma was skeptical at first, but as she listened, she understood. Sebastian Shaw must have one of his mutants possessing sonic hypnosis powers similar to those of the legendary Siren, who had hypnotized all the guards and easily rescued them. "This isn't your fault. Go down first." After a few more soothing words, Emma sent the young man away. She turned to Howard, who was surveying the ruins, and whispered, "Howard, is the damage serious?" A plan that even the floating temple had been destroyed made him regret it. "It's serious." Howard's face turned bitter, his eyebrows knitted together. "The holographic console is completely destroyed. Controlling the savage land is impossible." Emma was startled by this and asked quickly, "Didn't I tell you to move the holographic console ahead of time?" Emma valued the holographic console so much that she had Howard move it from the very beginning, fearing it might be accidentally destroyed. "I haven't even figured out the holographic console yet. How can I move it?" Howard said helplessly, looking at Emma with a hint of resentment. "I shouldn't have agreed to your plan in the first place. Now, I've gained nothing." Emma suddenly felt dazed. Looking at the rubble and broken walls on the ground, she asked hesitantly, "Is there really no way? Forget about control." "We're lucky to have full surveillance now," Howard said, as he continued to clean up the wreckage of the holographic console. Behind Howard, Emma breathed a sigh of relief at the news, patting her chest and saying happily, "This surveillance is enough." The holographic console's ability to control the entire savage land was indeed impressive, but unfortunately, it was of little use to Emma. After all, the planes were uncontrollable. As Sebastian Shaw and a large number of Hellfire Club mutants fled to a city of Atlantean descendants, a girl with reddish-gold hair entered the fetal care center in the inhuman hidden city of Atlan. Hearing the sound of footsteps outside, His Highness Alex opened his eyes hazily, looked at his men's mutagenesis box and the person lying inside. A trace of sadness flashed in his eyes, and his mood suddenly became bad. He shouted at the voice gradually approaching outside, "No matter who you are, get out of here immediately." The footsteps outside stopped immediately, and then a sweet voice was heard, "Uncle Alex, it's me, Crystal." His Highness Alex paused slightly, then let out a long sigh. It turned out to be Crystal. "Come in." As he spoke, a tall girl slowly walked in, with long golden red hair draped over her shoulders, a faint smile on her pretty face, exuding unparalleled youthful vitality, which made people laugh unconsciously. As if influenced by the girl, the corners of Alex's mouth curled up slightly. "Crystal, why are you here instead of training with Gorgon?" The girl called Crystal curled her lips, her eyebrows raised slightly, and said playfully, "I heard from my sister that my uncle had a child, so I thought I'd come over to see him." Speaking of his child, Alex's expression darkened again. He turned to look at the mutagen box, his eyes filled with despair, like a pool of stagnant water, devoid of any hope. News of Alex hadn't spread widely in Atlan, and few knew about it, let alone the fact that Alex had been mutated by the Terrigen Mist. Crystal, unaware of the situation, assumed Alex had only recently undergone the mutagen. She paid no attention to Alex's expression and simply leaned over the mutagen box, examining the motionless Alex within. "Uncle, he really looks like you." Crystal studied him for a long moment, then turned to look at Prince Alex again. She couldn't help but exclaim in delight, "But he's even more handsome than Uncle. By the way, Uncle, what's his name?" Hearing Crystal's cheerful voice, Prince Alex's mood gradually warmed up. He couldn't help but chuckle and said, "Alex, the same name as mine." "Then Uncle is Big Alex, and he's Little Alex," Crystal observed and laughed playfully, then suddenly exclaimed, "Uncle, why is his hair black?" His mother's hair was black, so his looks are more like hers. Prince Alex's eyes moistened as he spoke, remembering the past. Crystal was a kind child. Looking at her uncle's expression, she deliberately teased and said, "Uncle, tell Crystal the story of you and Auntie. I never knew what the outside world was like. One winter, I ran away from Atlan." Prince Alex didn't refuse. He wiped the tears from his eyes and lost himself in distant memories. "Later, my whereabouts were discovered, and they wanted to take me back to Atlan. To avoid implicating Huru, I had no choice but to follow them." As he spoke, Alex could no longer hold back his tears, which flowed like a flood. "But I didn't know Huru was pregnant. If I had known, I would never have left her and her child. I hated so much. I feel so sorry for her and her child." Crystal was a little flustered. She turned to look at Alex in the mutagen box and quickly spoke to him, "Uncle, your child has come to you. You should be happy. Once he finishes mutagenizing, you can live happily together." It would have been better if she hadn't said this. Once she did, it only exposed Alex's wounds, and his tears intensified. Crystal was completely stunned, not knowing what to do. She looked at Alex sobbing, at a loss for what to do. After a while, Alex's tears stopped. After a moment of pain, his mood actually improved considerably, as if the sadness that had been pent up for over a month had finally flowed out of his body with tears. "Crystal, do you know?" Prince Alex rubbed his face vigorously, looking at the mutagen box, and said in a steady voice, "Alex underwent the divine mist mutagenesis a month ago. At that time, he absorbed the divine mist from the mutations of dozens of ordinary people and has been in a coma ever since." Crystal suddenly realized what she had said, and was filled with astonishment. She finally realized what foolish thing she had just said. "Uncle, I'm sorry, it's okay, I believe he will wake up," Prince Alex said with certainty, as if speaking to Crystal, but more to himself. "I will wait until he wakes up." The novel Marvel Mind Transporter will have more fresh content on the official widget platform, and there will also be a 100% chance of winning a prize. Open widget now, click the plus sign in the top right to add friends, search for the official account Dread and follow it. Hurry. Chapter 162 10 years. Atlan, Fetal Care Center. His Highness Alex, with a sleepy face, crouched outside a mutagenesis chamber, tenderly gazing at the figure encased in blue crystal within. 3 years, child, when will you finally wake up? 3 years had passed unnoticed since Alex had been mutated by the Terrigen Mist. The crystal within Alex showed no sign of shattering, sending His Highness, initially excited, into a state of endless anxiety. Then, after that, indifference. The longer the wait, the more powerful the mutated abilities. But beyond a certain point, the wait became an agonizing ordeal, the outcome no longer a matter of power, but rather a matter of life or death. Yet, through endurance, His Highness Alex grew accustomed to it. Just as she was thinking, a familiar sound of footsteps echoed outside. Without turning back, His Highness Alex called out, "Crystal, it's training time now. If you run out, be careful, Gorgon will teach you a lesson." Crystal, with her golden red hair, entered with a cheerful stride, a warm and cheerful smile on her face. She excitedly pumped her fist in triumph. "It's okay. Gorgon wouldn't dare teach me a lesson. He's no match for me now." For the past 3 years, Crystal had come here whenever she had time, to visit Alex lying in the mutagen box and chat with her uncle. Their relationship had grown stronger and stronger. Meanwhile, in the Savage Land, within the rebuilt floating temple on the giant floating island, Emma leaned back in a chair. Behind her, a tall young man gently squeezed her shoulder, saying soothingly, "Little mother, rest when you're tired. Don't overwork yourself." A massive two-winged dragon, lying nearby, raised its head at the sound and gently licked Emma's face with its tender pink tongue, its sticky saliva immediately soaking her clothes. "Kiki, I'm warning you again, stop licking me." Emma stood up angrily, pointing at the dragon nearby and lashing out. The two-winged dragon was none other than Kiki, the little fire dragon from before. Hearing Emma's rant, it advanced, its tongue thrusting out once more. Emma dodged, twisting her body and pointing at the young man behind her. With a furious expression, she charged forward, raising her hand to strike him. "Little Lualo, did you tell Kiki to do that?" 7-year-old Lualo, now the size of an average young man, took Emma's blow head-on, then deftly dodged, leading Emma in a sprint around Kiki's massive frame, yelling, "Little mother, when you're upset, you need to let it out. Holding it in for too long will harm you. Vent it out, vent it out." "Is that how you're going to make me let it out?" Emma was furious, but, to be honest, it was working. After all the scolding and beatings, she felt much better. 3 years had passed, and there had been no news of Alex. She had searched for a long time, and SHIELD had searched for a long time, but there was still no news of the Inhumans. Even Tarsim, the one she feared so much, had vanished without a trace. 3 years passed, and before she knew it, 10 years had passed. Atlan had weathered war, and the Fetal Care Center had been destroyed and rebuilt. Today, the center is larger and more sophisticated than it was 10 years ago. In a separate room within the center, a middle-aged man sat blankly in a chair. Before him lay a mutagen box, within which lay a figure encased in blue crystal. 10 years, child. It's time to wake up, the middle-aged man said after a long silence, gazing at the figure within the crystal, and sighing. Just then, familiar footsteps were heard from the doorway, mixed with a few unfamiliar ones. Confused, Alex turned to look. Crystal walked in first, followed by a man and a woman. The woman looked quite similar to Crystal, with long red hair that fell to her waist. She must be Crystal's sister Medusa, whom she always talked about. The stern-faced man next to Medusa was undoubtedly Crystal's brother-in-law, Medusa's husband, and the current king of the Inhumans, Black Bolt. Prince Alex had not left this room for a long time. The battle that almost destroyed Atlan had not forced him to leave, but through Crystal's introduction, Prince Alex knew everything about the Inhumans. "What's the matter, Crystal?" Prince Alex glanced at Black Bolt and Medusa, turned his head to look at Crystal, and asked in confusion, "What are you bringing them here for?" Crystal glanced awkwardly at her sister and brother-in-law beside her. She hesitated for a while, but was speechless. Medusa glanced at her sister, coughed lightly, and began, "Uncle Alex, the situation is this: the slave workers have revolted, and Atlan is in great danger. We need you to step in and take charge." Prince Alex paused, then shook his head with a wry smile, saying, "I'm a worthless person. How could I possibly take charge?" "You can do it, Uncle." Crystal, prompted by her sister, joined in the persuasion. "You're the only elder left in the royal family. If you don't step in, who else will?" Prince Alex shuddered and stood up abruptly, looking at Crystal in bewilderment, as if he couldn't believe his ears. "Blake's brother, Maxim, secretly attacked him." Medusa spoke again, her delicate face etched with uncontrollable resentment. Meanwhile, Black Bolt, beside her, remained calm. "Blake misused his powers, resulting in the deaths of many, including his parents, my brother." Prince Alex looked at Black Bolt in disbelief, his calm eyes tinged with anger. If it weren't for his brother's unwavering support over the past 10 years, he and his son would have been executed long ago. Crystal quickly stepped forward and grabbed His Highness Alex's arm, carefully persuading him, "This isn't my brother-in-law's fault. Blame Maxim." "Yes, this is all Maxim's fault," Medusa said fiercely. Her long red hair grew rapidly, and in a moment it fell to the ground, making the gray floor look like a red carpet. "I'm not qualified. Let him take over." Alex nodded with a wry smile, slumping back into his chair. He pointed at the icy Black Bolt. "He's the son of a royal family, and incredibly powerful. It's perfectly reasonable for him to inherit the Inhuman King." Medusa glanced back at her lover, then back at Alex. She said in a deep voice, "Black isn't ready to succeed the Inhuman King yet. The slaves are revolting, and Atlan is in danger of falling. I beg Uncle Alex to intervene." Alex turned to look at Black Bolt, his aged face expressionless. "You are the Inhuman King. Whether you're ready or not, you must take on this responsibility." Black Bolt was visibly stunned, then shook his head resolutely. "Black feels guilty and unworthy of the Inhuman King." Black Bolt was speechless, so Medusa served as his mouthpiece. "You are indeed guilty," His Highness Alex stated bluntly without hesitation. "But if you took on the Inhuman King's courage, you are even more guilty." With that, His Highness Alex ignored him and turned to look at the mutagen box. Crystal and Medusa exchanged a glance, smiled wryly, and shook their heads, indicating that they were powerless. Medusa sighed and turned to look at Black Bolt, noticing a change in his expression, a sign of hope. After a moment, Black Bolt nodded and bowed solemnly to His Highness Alex. Medusa quickly translated, "Thank you, Uncle Alex. I will be a good king of the Inhumans. Go away. Don't disturb my child's sleep." His Highness Alex snorted and, without hesitation, began to dismiss them. Black Bolt and Medusa hesitated for a moment before turning and leaving. Crystal, however, remained. "Why don't you go help your sister and brother-in-law?" Crystal pulled a chair over and sat next to His Highness Alex, staring intently at the mutagen box. She casually replied, "Those two are enough. I'm not needed." His Highness Alex chuckled but said nothing. In the desert, within the floating temple, Emma, Vivian Lee, and the others sat side by side, their expressions somewhat gloomy. "It's been 10 years. Are you still going to wait?" Emma glanced at the three women around her, a strange expression on her face, one of pity and admiration. 10 years had passed, and Vivian Lee had aged, with crow's feet appearing around her eyes. But even so, her peerless beauty remained. 10 years as a boss had given Vivian Lee a new aura of power. Under Vivian Lee's leadership, X-Film had become a top Hollywood film production company, producing critically acclaimed films. The principles Alex had originally established, gradually implemented under Vivian Lee's guidance, were gradually influencing people. At least now, many people no longer feared mutants. Vivian Lee glanced at Emma, chuckled, and said calmly, "After so many years, I don't mind waiting any longer. My brother owed me a 10-year promise, and he's doubling it in exchange for me." Audrey, a woman of many years, had finally grown into the elegant and beautiful goddess she would become. Her slightly melancholic eyes concealed an unshakable resolve. Next to her, The chubby Monroe, clad in a coat and trousers, was fully covered, yet her alluring sexiness couldn't be concealed. "I'm my brother's, always have been, and that's never going to change." 10 years later, the three women still remembered Alex. Honestly, Emma was deeply moved and impressed, and the previous barriers between them vanished. But Emma didn't want them to die alone. After all, they were just ordinary people. She tried to persuade them again and again, but the three women blocked her as soon as she opened her mouth. "Wait, we'll wait together. The novel Marvel Mind Transporter will have more fresh content on the official Widget platform, and there will also be a 100% chance of winning a prize. Open Widget now, click the plus sign in the upper right to add friends, search for the official account Dread and follow it. Hurry up, I kept writing, and I just wrote 3,000 words, which is enough to complete the chapter." In fact, Scorpio had been conceiving of this chapter for a long time. From World War II to the present day, the span is really too long, 70 years, based on the movie time. There is no other way but to use this method to jump between time. Otherwise, 70 years of time would be too difficult to write. I hope everyone will forgive me. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 163, Sleeping for 10 Years. In the Savage Land, at the floating temple, after a heavy drunken bout, Emma rubbed her sleepy eyes and slowly awoke. Her head felt as if it was about to explode, and Emma frowned in pain. Three women lay sprawled around her, none other than Vivian Lee and her three daughters. Emma was no ordinary woman. After all, she was much better off than Vivian Lee and her three daughters. She slowly sat up and glanced around in surprise. "Who put us in this bed?" Emma remembered the four of them getting drunk in the main hall of the floating temple last night, vaguely remembering them ending up lying there. Could it be little Luo? The thought was followed by an unbearable headache. Without further thought, she turned over and started to get out of bed. Just as she was about to get out of bed, Emma froze, staring blankly at the person who had suddenly appeared before her. Excitement was followed by disappointment. Shaking her head, she smiled wryly and said, "I'm dreaming again." "Emma, you're not dreaming," Alex said, his voice trembling with emotion as he looked at the person before him. The familiar voice, forever etched in her mind, rang out. Emma's body shuddered, the bitterness deepening on her face, a hint of self-mockery etched in her. "I'm sober, and I'm still hallucinating." Hearing Emma's words, seeing the expression on her face, Alex couldn't hold back any longer, tears streaming down his face like a river of despair. "Emma, I'm Alex. I'm back, really back." Emma's body shuddered again, and she looked up blankly at Alex in disbelief, hesitant and frightened. Tears welled up in her eyes. "You, really, Alex?" Alex's tears streamed down his face, and he nodded hurriedly, his guilt towards Emma and the other girls growing even stronger. How many decades are there in a lifetime? They'd waited for him for 10. How long would it take him to repay them? A lifetime wouldn't be enough. The two women's voices startled Vivian and the other two girls. They stared at Alex, who had suddenly appeared before them. Like Emma, they were hesitant and disbelieving. "Alex, is it really you?" As they spoke, tears streamed down their cheeks. "I'm sorry. I'm sorry," Alex kept repeating himself, opening his arms and embracing all four of them, tightly, as if trying to rub them against his body. After a long sob, the girls finally stopped crying and stared at Alex with red eyes, unblinking. Audrey hugged Alex's waist tightly, her head resting on his chest, feeling the thump of his heartbeat. She whispered, "Brother, where have you been these past 10 years? Hearing Audrey's voice, tinged with resentment, Alex felt even more guilty. Thinking back to the past 10 years, he felt a mixture of laughter and tears, his voice tinged with bitterness. "For these 10 years, I've been sleeping, waking up." 10 years had already passed, an unimaginable pain for Alex. Clearly, no one believed Alex's words. They all looked at him angrily, thinking he was joking. Seeing the girls' expressions, Alex gave a wry smile and recounted his 10-year experience. Of course, these were all told to Alex by others. He was asleep, unaware of what was happening outside. When Alex finished, the four girls stared at him in shock. They couldn't believe that sleeping for 10 years could actually be true. Seeing the bitterness on Alex's face, Emma opened her mouth to offer some words of comfort, But just then, the sounds of fierce fighting, interspersed with a few arguments, broke out outside. Emma frowned slightly, thinking of the incessant fighting and harassment over the past decade, and a wave of worry washed over her. Could it be that Sebastian Shaw and his men have sent someone to cause trouble again? Sebastian Shaw? What happened? Alex had just returned, and she had no idea what had happened in the past 10 years. Emma didn't have time to explain, and hurried out the door, contacting the X-Men as she ran. Alex, unsure of what was going on, followed Emma out of the room, and Vivian and the other girls followed suit. They ran outside to see a man and a woman fighting. The woman was none other than Crystal, who had left Atlin with Alex, but the man was a stranger, about 25 or 26 years old, and Alex had a vague feeling he looked familiar. Seeing this, Alex knew there must be a misunderstanding, and quickly flashed between the two of them, grabbing the boy's arm with one hand and blocking the earth and stone fist controlled by Crystal with the other hand. "Crystal, we are one of us." Crystal glanced at Alex, snorted coldly, and casually dispersed the condensed earth and stone fist. Without even looking at anyone else, she hugged Alex's arm and complained like a spoiled child, "You've been delayed for a whole night. Why are you planning to set off to find my sister? Who is she?" Women usually have extraordinary intuition. Looking at Crystal, who was hugging Alex's arm, the four Emma girls looked at each other and looked at Alex sinisterly. Alex felt guilty toward the four girls. Seeing their expressions, he immediately turned away from Crystal and explained, "This is my cousin. She came with me to look for her missing sister." Without waiting for the girls to ask, Alex turned to Crystal and asked, "Crystal, why are you fighting?" "It's not my fault. It's this kid who came in and tried to hit me." Crystal glared at Alex, then pointed at the boy who had suddenly stood next to Emma, shouting in dissatisfaction. Alex glanced over, feeling that the boy looked familiar. Just as he was contemplating something, he spoke. "Little Daddy." Alex froze, staring at the boy with a look of disbelief on his face. Little Lualuo nodded fiercely, rushing towards Alex like a moth to a flame, hugging him tightly. "Little Daddy, I missed you so much." Looking down at little Lualuo, who had embraced him, Alex was shocked. Little Lualuo was only 15 years old at most, so how could he have grown into a young man in his mid-20s? Thinking back, at 4 years old, little Lualuo already looked like 8 or 9, so it made sense that he would grow up like this. And as little Lualuo grew up, he looked more and more like his father. "By the way, where's Kiki?" Seeing little Lualuo, Alex couldn't help but think of Charmander. Ever since he brought little Lualuo home, it had been Charmander that had taken little Lualuo around the world most of the time. "Kiki is at the front." Little Lualuo turned to look at Emma, with a hint of frustration on his well-defined face. "I want to go to the front too, but my little mother won't let me go." Hearing this, Alex couldn't help but think of what Emma said before. Could it be that Sebastian Zio and the others have sent people to make trouble again? Full of doubts, Alex turned to look at Emma. Just as he was about to speak, a huge group of people surrounded him from all directions, each of them with murderous intent on their faces. And one of them even shouted curses at the top of his voice. Where did this bastard come from? How dare he break into the temple? Chapter 164 Hand of God. Alex looked at the X-Men rushing in, laughing and crying. He turned to Emma and said telepathically, "Emma, didn't you tell them?" Hearing Alex's words, Emma's face flushed. Her pretty face turned cold as she waited for the burly man who had shouted first. She shouted, "Lexus, look who this is." As she spoke, Emma pointed at Alex, her expression as if she wanted to eat someone. The X-Men were startled by Emma's expression. Looking in the direction of Emma's finger, they were suddenly stunned. How could they not recognize Alex? Lexus, who was cursing, was even more frightened and sweaty. He tried to speak tremblingly, but he couldn't say a word. Alex didn't want to scare these little guys as soon as he came back, so he chuckled and said slowly, "Okay, it's okay here, you all should leave." Hearing Alex's words, Lexus, who was scared to the point of almost peeing his pants, turned around and left in a hurry. The other X-Men at least saluted and then slowly exited the floating temple. After sending the X-Men away, Alex was about to speak when Crystal, standing beside him, puffed out her lips like a goldfish and angrily said, "Alex, when are you going to come with me to find my sister?" She glared at Emma and the other girls before continuing, "If you're not available, I'll go find her myself." Remembering his father's repeated instructions before leaving, Alex didn't dare let Crystal go alone. He immediately said, "Crystal, Earth is so big, how long will it take the two of us to find her?" Crystal's face changed as soon as she finished speaking. Alex quickly explained, "We can find someone to help us. I have a lot of people here. With their help, we'll find your sister quickly." Crystal was delighted at first, but then she looked at Emma and the other girls with a look of disdain, as if she didn't want their help. But then, remembering her sister was nowhere to be found, she could only hum a few words in agreement. After finally convincing Crystal, Alex turned to Emma, his expression growing serious. "Emma, what's happened all these years?" Alex had already guessed some of the details from the previous snippets, especially the mention of the front lines by little Luo, which gave Alex a shuddering feeling, as if he were back in World War II. Emma sighed and ushered everyone into the room. After they sat down, she began to explain, starting with the moment Sebastian Shaw and his companions escaped the observation room 10 years ago, and continuing until today. The past 10 years had been truly eventful. Emma spoke for over 3 hours, from dawn until noon. During this time, many people had come to see her, but they were all turned away. Only Howard, who had rushed in on the news, was allowed in. Alex nodded slightly when Howard entered, remaining motionless, listening intently to Emma's account. Finally, when Emma stopped, Alex sat still, lost in thought for a long moment. After a long pause, he sighed, "Emma, I've made you suffer these past few years. In the past 10 years, if it weren't for Emma's support, the floating island would have fallen long ago, and mutants would have been wiped out of the savage lands." For that alone, Alex had to thank Emma. Emma smiled faintly, pointed to Vivian and the other 2 women, and said solemnly, "Don't just thank me. They've done so much more for you, I will." Alex looked at the 3 women affectionately. After 10 years apart, the 3 women had changed. Some had matured, some had aged. As he spoke, Alex reached out one hand to grasp Vivian's palm, the other gently stroking the back of her now no longer tender hand. With each touch, the aging hand seemed a little younger. After a few times, Vivian's hand had become as white as a young girl's. Looking up at Vivian again, the crow's feet on her face had vanished. She looked completely refreshed, younger and more vibrant. Vivian's transformation immediately caught everyone's attention. They stared in amazement at the woman who looked a decade younger, unable to believe their eyes. They all turned to Alex, excitedly asking, "Alex, how did you do that?" "It's my new ability, the ability of the Inhumans." Alex chuckled, then took Audrey and Monroe's hands again. In an instant, the 2 women regained their youthful splendor, their beauty rekindled. "This ability is simply incredible." Howard, tugging at his mustache, gazed enviously at the 3 women's renewed youth. Turning to Alex, he offered his hand, shouting, "Alex, come on, too. Youth is not just a woman's dream, it's also a man's dream." Not only was Howard his brother, but Alex certainly wouldn't refuse his unwavering care for the mutants over the past decade. However, Alex couldn't shake a man's hand, so he performed it on Howard from a distance. This time, it took a little longer, and Howard, rejuvenated, was completely thrilled. "Alex, what kind of power is this?" Unlike the others, who were ecstatic, Emma's face was filled with worry. X-School had been continuously researching mutant abilities for years, and using abilities inevitably consumed a certain amount of energy. Rejuvenation obviously required even greater amounts of energy, and Emma was worried that Alex's body wouldn't be able to handle it. Alex, sensing Emma's concern, chuckled and said, "It's nothing, really. It's just Sebastian Shaw's ability being channeled." Sebastian Shaw could absorb energy to rejuvenate cells and maintain eternal youth. Alex used this ability on others with the same effect. "Little daddy, what kind of power is this?" Little Luo stood there, stunned and confused. "Energy control." Alex turned to look at Luo, a gentle smile on his face. "Precise energy control, no matter what energy." It would have been fine if Alex hadn't explained. This explanation confused not only Luo but also Emma. Crystal also peeked over. Since Alex woke up from the mutagen box, Crystal hadn't seen him use any other abilities besides the strange ability of teleportation. Her recent rejuvenation had astonished her. "Okay, let's see." Alex smiled faintly and pointed at Luo. In a flash, 2 pure white wings, like angel wings, suddenly sprouted from Luo's back. "Luo, try flying." Luo felt the wings sprouting from his back. The instant they grew had already astonished him. Even more amazingly, he felt as if they were natural, and he used them with ease. After hearing Alex's words, Little Lualua flapped his wings without hesitation and soared into the air with a whoosh, soaring joyfully around the room with a bright smile on his face. Come down. As Alex finished speaking, little Lualua, who was enjoying his flight, felt the wings on his back gradually disappear. When he hurriedly landed on the ground, the wings had completely vanished, as if they had never appeared. Seeing everyone's stunned expressions, Alex whispered, "This is energy control. Well, a relatively advanced control method." Alex casually summoned another fireball, which constantly transformed in his hand, sometimes into a bunny, sometimes into a human figure. This is the simplest form of control. Looking at Alex's right hand and thinking of the previous rejuvenation, everyone thought of the same words, Hand of God. Chapter 165 Savage Three Kingdoms. After demonstrating his new abilities, Alex returned to the topic, where are they now, Sebastian Shaw and those mutants? Alex was prepared to personally resolve this problem. If possible, he even considered killing them, eliminating any further trouble. Initially, considering they were all mutants, Alex had simply imprisoned Sebastian Shaw and the others. However, after seeing their actions over the past decade, Alex wished he could eliminate them all sooner rather than later, to prevent them from harming the entire mutant population. Since escaping the floating island, Sebastian Shaw had led a group of Hellfire Club mutants to join AIM, and the two factions joined forces to continuously attack the floating island. During that period, the floating island was under attack almost daily, with casualties occurring every other day. Sebastian Shaw and his men had no regard for the safety of the mutants on the floating island. Fortunately, Emma was prepared. With the help of undercover agent Tessa, she successfully alienated Sebastian Shaw and Stryker. Sebastian Shaw then led the mutants of the Hellfire Club to break away from AIM and form the Brotherhood of Mutants, becoming mortal enemies. The two rivals fought for supremacy, turning into a Three Kingdoms war. The vast plains were divided between Sebastian Shaw and Stryker, while Emma and her mutants fiercely defended the forest borders, firmly occupying the floating island, the primeval forest, and the swamps. As for the Red Skull, who had escaped with Sebastian Shaw, Stryker sent him out of the Savage Lands to fight the fake Red Skull. Sebastian Shaw's evil deeds were not limited to the Savage Lands. In the outside world, he and his mutants constantly caused chaos, destroying the positive image of mutants that X-Force had worked so hard to establish. This was a key reason why Alex decided to kill him. Emma could clearly see the murderous intent in Alex's eyes. After a moment's hesitation, she led everyone out of the room, heading towards the main hall of the floating temple, where the holographic control panel stood. Ever since Sebastian Shaw's previous destruction of the floating temple, the holographic control panel had been destroyed. The one currently housed in the main hall was a simple device Howard had developed. It could only monitor the entire Savage Land in real time, excluding the plains, but it could no longer control the Savage Land's climate, topography, or anything else. As Emma explained, Alex peered into the shrunken holographic control panel before him. At the junction of the forest and the plains, he saw a vast, endless wall, taller than any of the ancient cities Alex had discovered. Smaller cities had been built within the forest surrounding the wall, each filled with mutants, a dense swarm. Alex looked at Emma in surprise at the ant-like crowd swarming along the towering wall. We have so many mutants. Alex remembered that there were only 500,000 mutants on the floating island, but the number of mutants entwined by the high wall that enclosed the entire forest was likely far greater. Over the past 10 years, more mutants have been joining us, Emma chuckled, turning to look at Howard with gratitude in her eyes. This is all thanks to Howard, Nick, and the others. Without their help, these mutants wouldn't have found this place. Alex glanced at Howard and casually said, I'll have a drink with you sometime. Between brothers, no words are needed. A glass of wine is enough. Emma shook her head and chuckled, then pointed to a spot near the center of the plain. Sebastian Shaw's Brotherhood of Mutants is right here, she said. But according to Tessa, he's been missing for a long time, and no one knows where he's gone. Missing? Alex frowned, looking at Emma in surprise. Sharing a glance with Alex, Emma shrugged, her face resigned. Yes, missing. There's no sign of him in the Savage Lands, and no news of him outside. Nick's been looking for him for days, but there's been no news, Howard chimed in, a serious expression on his face. Sebastian Shaw was an undeniable threat, not just to mutants but to human society as a whole. His sudden disappearance naturally caught the attention of many. Alex, feeling somewhat disappointed, turned his gaze back to the holographic console. He scanned the planes and quickly located a spot near the sea marked as AIM. Is this the AIM base? Is Strucker here? With Sebastian Shaw missing, Alex had no choice but to settle for the next best thing, to trouble Strucker first. Alex, you can't mess with AIM, Alex began, but Emma's face immediately hardened, her words stern. Why? Alex's expression remained unchanged, though her tone grew slightly colder. Emma's bitterness deepened, and she turned to look at Howard again, motioning for him to speak. Those lunatics in AIM have cracked the technology left behind by the aliens in the Savage Lands, Howard declared angrily, his words punctuated by a hint of envy. Even though they don't have the holographic console, they have the power to destroy the Savage Lands ecosystem. Howard's voice trailed off, his expression growing increasingly resigned and unwilling. The reason the Savage Land has a unique ecology, geography, and climate, unlike the rest of the world, even dinosaurs, extinct for tens of thousands of years, are so crucially due to its unique ecosystem. Without this ecosystem, the Savage Land would be destroyed in a matter of minutes. Alex was well aware of this, so after hearing Howard's explanation, he was stunned. After a moment, he asked, "Isn't there any other way?" Alex never liked being threatened. Faced with such an AIM, Alex's only desire was to completely destroy them. Seeing Howard shaking his head like a rattle, Alex grew even more frustrated. Doesn't that mean I can't do anything even if I want to, right? Emma and Howard exchanged a glance and nodded. Unrelated sentence fragment. Little Daddy, you can train us. Little Luo suddenly interrupted at this time, with a longing expression on his face. Little Daddy's fighting is very powerful, and many people want to learn from him. Ever since Alex left, the fighting course at X Academy has been in a state of no one is available. In the end, it was Nick Fury who took the time to teach some fighting techniques, and with the teachings of the first wave of students who followed Alex, fighting was passed down in X Academy. However, compared with Alex, these people's abilities were obviously much weaker. Emma's eyes lit up when she heard this, and she turned to look at Alex, nodded hurriedly and said, "Alex, the position of fighting teacher at X Academy has always been reserved for you." Chapter 166, Brotherhood of Mutants. No rush, I'll go check here first. Alex shook his head, rejecting Emma's suggestion. He pointed to the center of the plane on the holographic console, where a sign similarly read, Brotherhood of Mutants. Sebastian Shaw, the ringleader, was gone, but the Brotherhood still had many accomplices, and Alex had no problem teaching them a lesson. A moment later, Alex left the floating temple and instantly appeared in a bustling city. This city, called Brotherhood, was the headquarters of the Brotherhood of Mutants and the only other mutant city in the Savage Land besides the floating island. Unfortunately, the mutants here were all Brotherhood members, followers of Sebastian Shaw, and filled with hatred for humans. Because Brotherhood was a pure mutant city, its streets teeming with mutants, Alex's appearance didn't arouse anyone's suspicion. Alex walked casually through the streets of Brotherhood, observing everything around him with a critical eye. Contrary to his expectations, this city wasn't a city of sin. On the contrary, the atmosphere in the city of Brotherhood was even more harmonious than the floating island, so harmonious that Alex thought it was all an illusion. After observing them for a while, Alex realized that harmony was indeed just an illusion. Whenever the question of the status of humans and mutants came up, the people here became violent and ferocious, their bloodshot eyes reminding Alex of the wolves in the forest. The more he observed, the more depressed and bitter Alex felt. The mutants throughout the city had been brainwashed by Sebastian Shaw's doctrine of mutant supremacy. Their hatred for humans had taken root deep within them, and their worship and faith in Sebastian Shaw was even more unwavering than the German army's worship of Hitler, and it was indelible. Observing these mutants, Alex no longer had any intention of teaching the Brotherhood a lesson. The city was full of mutants. Could he possibly massacre the entire city? Alex certainly couldn't bring himself to do that, so he gave up. No longer interested in teaching the Brotherhood a lesson, Alex had no desire to remain in the city of brotherly love. He raced through the streets of the city of brotherly love, intent on completing his second mission and leaving quickly. Alex's mission in the city of brotherly love wasn't just to teach the Brotherhood a lesson, he had other tasks, including retrieving Eric. Eric, the young boy who had followed Alex out of the Gulag concentration camp, the future Magneto, had grown into a man. With his powerful metal manipulation abilities, Eric had become the Brotherhood's most potent weapon. His unpredictable steel balls had become the most brutal weapon against the X-Men, inflicting wounds and deaths on countless X-Men. Hatred for Eric was etched deeply into the memories of every X-Men. Eric also gained a new nickname, Magneto. When Alex heard the news from Emma, he was stunned. His mind clung to the excited little boy who had followed him out of the ghetto concentration camp, the boy who had become aloof and withdrawn after his father was killed by humans, the child who, locked in the observation room, refused to change despite his repeated attempts to persuade him. Alex was instantly overwhelmed with regret. If he had been there for the past 10 years, how could Eric have become like this? To atone for his mistakes, Alex resolved to come to the City of Brotherhood. Eric was a renowned figure in the City of Brotherhood. With a simple inquiry, telepathy, Alex discovered his address. He sprinted, arriving in less than a minute at a detached villa. Glancing around, Alex slipped silently inside. To Alex's surprise, as he emerged from thin air, a cold voice echoed in his ear, followed by a sharp pain in his thigh. Alex looked down and saw a hole in his thigh, from which bright red blood gushed out like a fountain. Fighting back the pain, Alex turned to look at the source of the sound. A young man sat expressionlessly on the living room sofa, surrounded by streaks of silver light. Alex squinted and saw silver-white steel balls, flying at such a high speed that they transformed into streaks of light. The young man's appearance vaguely resembled Eric's youth, especially his eyes, which had remained virtually unchanged, though only becoming more cold. As he watched, Alex sighed deeply, staring at the young man, and slowly called out, "Eric." Eric was visibly stunned. He stared at Alex's face, lost in thought for a moment before he called out uncertainly, "Alex, I didn't expect you to remember me, Eric." Alex was relieved that Eric still remembered him, and a smile crept across his face. "Please call me Magneto." Eric's face suddenly changed, and the look he gave Alex became even more fierce. "Also, leave here immediately, otherwise, don't blame me for being rude." The smile on Alex's face suddenly froze, and the palm he had just raised also stopped in midair. He stared blankly at Eric a few meters away. Alex felt as if there was a huge chasm between him and him. After a moment of daze, Alex came back to his senses, the smile on his face disappeared, and with a heart full of guilt, he shouted softly, "Eric, get out!" But before Alex could finish, Eric suddenly stood up, yelling and interrupting Alex. The steel balls around him spun even faster, and in the blink of an eye, it seemed to have turned into a silver light curtain, tightly enveloping Eric. Alex was stunned again, then recovered himself after a moment. The expression on his face vanished, and a hint of coldness appeared in his eyes, even colder than Eric's. "No matter how much you hate me, today, I must take you away." With that, Alex instantly appeared beside Eric, reaching out to grab his shoulder. As if anticipating this, Eric transformed a steel ball into an extremely thin, sharp blade, slashing down vertically, as if to sever Alex's hand. Alex grunted softly, ignoring the impact. His hand was severed, but inertia forced it back onto Eric's shoulder. Eric froze for a moment, and before he could recover, he realized he had lost control of the steel ball. Turning back, he saw his severed hand had returned to Alex's arm. Chapter 167 Old Friends Reunion. Alex twisted his newly received hand, looking sideways at Eric, who looked dazed. He chuckled and said, "Surprise." Eric blushed at the sound, snorted softly, and once again controlled the steel balls to attack Alex. However, something unbelievable happened. He lost control of the steel balls. Suddenly, Eric looked up at Alex. He knew Alex could replicate his abilities, and thinking of the hand that had just rested on his shoulder, he suddenly understood. He looked at Alex with a hint of vigilance. Seeing Eric's brow furrowed, Alex sighed silently. Without saying anything, he controlled the steel balls to merge together, gradually expanding and converging into a figure, thin and slightly stooped, with a face vaguely similar to Eric's. Seeing the figure Alex had conjured, Eric's face darkened. He pointed at him and shouted, "Get out, Eric!" Alex ignored Eric's shout. His face hardened, and he stared at Eric and said gravely, "If your father were still alive, he would certainly not want to see you like this." Eric's nostrils flared rapidly, two streams of white air flowing in and out. His eyes shone with an uncontrollable fire, and his vicious gaze was like a knife, as if he wanted to cut Alex into pieces. Alex looked at Eric with a bitter face, and a deep sense of guilt welled up in his heart. If he had taken better care of him, perhaps Eric wouldn't be in this state. Just as he was thinking, Eric suddenly spoke again, each word clearly hammered out from between his teeth. "Leave this place immediately. I don't want to see you again." Alex's face darkened as he stared at Eric. He sighed helplessly and said slowly, "Since that's the case, this is the only solution I can offer." As he spoke, Alex moved, appearing beside Eric in an instant. Before Eric could react, he struck with lightning speed. A blue ice crystal, similar to Eric's crystal, suddenly enveloped Eric at an incredible speed. Eric reacted quickly, but before he could even react, he was completely encased in the blue ice. His body seemed frozen, unable to move, and even his breathing stopped. Only his brain seemed to be functioning. Terrified, Eric tried to control the metal to break free from the blue ice. But then he realized his abilities had been limited. He felt as if he couldn't control himself from the blue ice crystal, trapped within it. "Eric, I'm doing this for your own good," Alex sighed, picked up Eric, who was wrapped in the blue ice crystal, and slipped away. But at that moment, a red-haired girl covered in blue scales walked in, shouting, "Eric, today Alex was stunned for a moment when he saw the newcomer, and then he realized that this must be Mystique from the movie. However, what Alex couldn't understand was why Mystique was with Eric. Wasn't she supposed to be with young Professor X? While Alex was lost in thought, Raven also reacted. Her face darkened, and she assumed an attacking stance, demanding sharply, "Who are you? What do you want?" Alex, startled awake by Raven's clear voice, shook his head, clearing the confusion from his mind. This is reality, not a movie. With that thought, Alex felt a sudden sense of relief. He lifted Eric from his shoulder and chuckled, "I'm Alex, and I'm here to take Eric away." Raven was visibly stunned. She hadn't expected Alex to answer her question so seriously. After a moment's pause, she urgently shouted, "Put Eric down, or else." She couldn't finish the rest of the sentence because she was already restrained by Alex, also encased in blue ice crystals. Holding one in each hand, Alex shook her head with a wry smile, activated teleportation, and instantly returned to the floating temple. Suddenly, the floating temple was filled with a host of people, all familiar to Alex. The bald, eye-patch-wearing figure was Nick Fury, director of SHIELD, Carter, handsome in his military uniform, and the alluring, voluptuous blonde, naturally, Natasha, the Black Widow. When Alex returned with the two ice sculptures, his eyes welled up at the sight of the familiar crowd. He stood blankly at the entrance to the hall, watching the group inside, chatting and laughing. Alex's appearance immediately caught everyone's attention, and they all turned to look. Everyone's gaze immediately focused on Alex, while Eric and Raven, who should have been more conspicuous, were ignored. "We heard you were back, so we came to see you." Nick Fury was the first to approach Alex, holding him in his arms. Tears welled up in his single eye, a flicker of emotion. Alex paused for a moment, then reached out and hugged Nick Fury, feeling somewhat unfamiliar. After a moment, the familiar feeling returned. He looked up at Natasha and Carter, unable to help but choke back a sob. "I'm back. It's great to see you." Releasing Nick Fury, Alex hugged Carter and Natasha again as usual, and used his energy to restore Carter's youth. Nick Fury possessed the Infinity Formula, and remained the same. Natasha, possessing the Mutant Super Soldier Serum, had an extremely slow metabolism, showing no change even after 10 years, requiring no energy at all. Nick Fury and the other two had already met Vivian Lee and her 3 daughters, and after hearing Howard's introductions, they were only slightly surprised to see them in person, but quickly recovered. "Alex, will we all never age again?" Natasha reached out and grasped Carter's now whitened hand, looking at Alex with some surprise. If Alex's ability remained intact, everyone would achieve immortality. Unrelated sentence fragment. 1691. Alex smiled smugly, nodded, and said, "As long as you don't die, I can grant you eternal youth and immortality." Everyone was thrilled to hear this. No one wanted to live a little longer, except for one person. Howard pinched his sexy mustache, feeling quite emotional, as if complaining but also showing off. "Living too long is actually meaningless. You're taking advantage of me." Natasha kicked Howard unceremoniously, her beautiful eyes flashing a glare as she spoke with resentment. Howard fell to the ground, groaning as if he'd been truly hurt. Seeing Howard's antics, everyone couldn't help but burst into laughter, their moods extremely bright. "Something happened a few days ago and I couldn't update. I hope you can forgive me and I'll try to get back to it." Chapter 168 Trivial. After the laughter, everyone finally turned their attention to the ice crystal Alex had set aside. Raven had appeared frequently in the floating temple over the years, relying on her ever-changing shape-shifting abilities to sneak in and sabotage. Howard, a frequent visitor to the floating temple and even attacked once, was quite familiar with Raven. Howard glanced at Eric and Raven in the ice crystal, then turned his gaze to Alex and asked in confusion, "Alex, what are you trying to do by bringing them back?" Everyone turned to Alex. They all knew Eric's relationship with Alex, and while they could understand bringing Eric back, they just couldn't help but wonder why Raven had to be brought in. Alex chuckled and explained, then turned to Emma. "Emma, have there been any promising youngsters in the past 10 years? Seeing Magneto and Mystique standing together, Alex couldn't help but think of Professor X. The love-hate relationship between these three was a major attraction in the movie X-Men. Emma glanced at Alex in surprise, then nodded. There are indeed quite a few promising talents. What are you planning to do now? Alex rarely cared about such things, so it was no wonder she was surprised by the sudden mention. Is there anyone with exceptional telepathic abilities? Alex truly wanted to find Professor X, partly because of the movie's influence, and partly to find a helper for Emma. In the movie, Professor X was a staunch pacifist. Emma looked at Alex with an increasingly odd expression. After a moment's hesitation, she shook her head and said, "No." With another sigh, she added, somewhat helplessly, "Telepathy is extremely rare. Only a few have appeared in the past decade. Telepathy might be inferior to some physical abilities in combat, but for other supporting abilities, nothing could rival it. Perhaps for this reason, telepathic abilities are so rare among mutants, and even those who do possess them are usually not highly developed." Is that so? Alex frowned slightly and sighed, preparing to find a chance to go to New York and look for them himself. He remembered that Professor X lived in New York in the movies. As he thought about this, Alex turned to look at Nick Fury, his face slightly nervous, and whispered, Any news about them?" In the past 10 years, Alex believed that the world must have changed, some for good, some for bad, but what Alex cared about most was his brothers. Upon hearing this, several wrinkles appeared on Nick Fury's dark face. A hint of bitterness flashed in his single eye, and his big head shook slightly. "There is still no news about Steve? Bucky did show up a few times, but unfortunately he disappeared soon." Nick Fury forced a smile on his face and said slowly, "Logan is still the same, running around the world. Logan has been here a few times and has met little Luo." Emma added on the side, seemed to remember something, and hurriedly said, "By the way, Logan wants you to help choose a name for little Luo." Alex looked at Emma in amazement, then turned to look at little Luo, and found that he was turning his head away, with a hint of embarrassment on his young face, and the slightly pouting corners of his mouth also showed his mood at the moment. "Forget it, I think we should just call him little Luo." Alex was silent for a while with a strange look on his face, and in the end he didn't give little Luo any new name. "I've been calling you little Luo for more than 10 years, I'm used to it." Although little Luo was a little dissatisfied, but thinking about the reasons Alex said, if someone really called him a strange name, he would not be used to it, so he nodded and agreed. After talking and laughing, it was night before he knew it. Alex naturally kept Nick Fury and the others to stay and prepared a good drink. But at this moment, Crystal couldn't help running out. Crystal was unfamiliar with the place, and she basically stayed in her room all day, but she was also paying attention to the situation outside. When she heard that Alex was going to drink with others, Crystal couldn't help it. "Alex, when are you going to go find your sister?" Crystal was very angry. Her beautiful eyes glared at the dazed Alex fiercely, but she was thinking in her heart, "I shouldn't have agreed to let my uncle follow him. It would be so convenient for me to be alone." Alex was indeed frightened by the sudden appearance of Crystal. Hearing her words, he was even more amused. While reaching out to press Crystal's shoulders, he did not forget to comfort her. "Crystal, didn't I tell you? We need help finding someone." Alex pointed at Nick Fury and said, "Nonsense. Nick is the director of SHIELD, the world's largest intelligence organization. With his help, we will definitely find your sister soon." Crystal looked at Alex suspiciously, then turned to look at Nick Fury, looking him up and down, and asked doubtfully, "Is everything he said true?" Nick Fury and Alex had been friends for many years. Even after not seeing each other for 10 years, they still had a strong rapport. Alex's words immediately caught on, and he nodded, saying, "Yes, Alex, everything you said is true. In fact, we've already started looking." Compared to Alex, Nick Fury was even more eloquent. "I'm sure there'll be news soon. There's no need to worry." Crystal, deceived by Alex and Nick Fury's combined deception, believed them. A blush crept across her face. She apologized awkwardly to the two, then turned and ran back to her room, never to emerge again. Alex didn't offer a hand to hold her back. Instead, he turned to Nick Fury, gave him a thumbs up, and looked at him with admiration. "Alex, who is she?" Nick Fury rolled his eyes and turned to business. After all, he had made a promise, so he always had to keep it. "Tell me more specifically, what's going on?" Alex had nothing to hide, so he briefly recounted how Crystal's sister, Medusa, had disappeared and how his father had sent him out to find her. He then focused on Medusa's situation. She has long red hair, and it's said she can control it at will, growing or shrinking, softening or hardening it. She's quite powerful. As he spoke, Alex casually conjured Medusa's likeness from mid-air, bringing it to life and becoming truly magical. "Leave the photo behind, and I'll arrange for someone to find her," Nick Fury said casually after examining it carefully. He certainly had that confidence. After a decade of development, SHIELD had become the world's most powerful intelligence organization, with a global reach and a network of agents, from the imperial court to the common people. Alex didn't hesitate, nodding in gratitude. Putting aside trivial matters, the group soon started drinking again, and after a night, everyone was drunk. Chapter 169 Snow Area. After less than a week in the Savage Lands, Alex was forced to leave due to Crystal's repeated requests, accompanying Crystal on a global search for Medusa. Alex didn't want to leave the Savage Lands, but Crystal mentioned her father, His Highness Alex, and Alex gave in. After 10 years of companionship and understanding the hidden truth behind their past, Alex had forgiven his father and was even filled with gratitude and admiration for him. Otherwise, he wouldn't have agreed to leave Atlan with Crystal on her own terms, leaving her to search for Medusa. Even so, Alex still felt a little unhappy. He leisurely followed behind Crystal and asked calmly, "Wouldn't it be better to stay home and wait for news?" "That's my sister." Crystal turned to look at Alex, her clear eyes tinged with resentment. "If anything happens to my sister, I'll settle the score with you." Alex was stunned at the words, then quickly quickened his pace to catch up with Crystal, saying with a look of dissatisfaction, "Hey, your sister's accident wasn't because of me. Why are you going to settle the score with me?" "I'm going to settle the score with you." "What's wrong?" Crystal suddenly stopped and stared at Alex with a proud look on her face. Then, without giving Alex a chance to speak, she turned around and walked away, leaving Alex with a straight back. Alex was speechless. After days of aimless searching, Alex finally couldn't stand it anymore and grabbed Crystal again. "Sister, how long will it take you to find it if you keep searching aimlessly like this? Do you have a plan?" Crystal asked, looking up at Alex with a puzzled expression. Alex put a hand on her forehead, smiled wryly at Crystal, and sighed for a moment before asking helplessly, "Can I ask where Atlan is?" Alex had been unconscious when she entered Atlan, and upon exiting, she had teleported directly back to the wilderness. Alex knew only that Atlan was a floating city, but her exact location was unknown. "What do you want?" "Atlan's secrets can't be shared with outsiders." Crystal didn't answer, instead looking at Alex hesitantly, a hint of wariness in her eyes. Atlan was the Inhumans' hidden city, and it must not be revealed to outsiders. Alex's rash question naturally aroused Crystal's suspicion. Alex was stunned for a moment at Crystal's strange reaction before coming to his senses. He smacked Crystal's head hard and said angrily, "After all, I'm an Inhuman. Tell me what's wrong." Crystal froze for a moment, ducking her head and giving an awkward smile. She then flattered him by stating Atlan's location. Then, she asked, "What's wrong? Why are you asking?" Alex rolled his eyes in annoyance and began to explain, "Wasn't your sister knocked out of Atlan? She must be somewhere around here. That way, we'll be able to find her faster." Crystal's eyes shifted, as if confirming Alex's explanation. After a moment, she nodded in understanding. Then her expression changed again, and she pointed at Alex and demanded angrily, "Why didn't you tell us earlier? You've delayed us for so long, you didn't even ask." Alex glanced at Crystal coldly and replied nonchalantly. Crystal felt annoyed at his words, but she was completely helpless against Alex. "Where are we going now?" Seeing Alex, seemingly unmoved and composed, Crystal raised her hand and slapped him on the shoulder, demanding threateningly, "Hurry and find my sister so I can go back and talk to my uncle." Alex didn't hear Crystal's threat. Remembering his father's instructions before leaving, he smiled bitterly and shook his head. His telekinesis reached out and enveloped Crystal, and the teleportation instantly vanished. In the blink of an eye, they arrived in an unfamiliar place. Crystal unconsciously moved closer to Alex. Feeling the chill, Crystal couldn't help but hug herself, turned to Alex, and asked, "Where's this place, Huaxia, the snow region?" Alex looked around with a look of deep emotion, a mysterious meaning in his eyes. In his previous life, Alex had visited Tibet several times and was familiar with the snow region. Ever since he learned that Atlan was on Mount Everest, Alex had been thinking about exploring the snow region of China. Then, Alex subconsciously recalled the snow region of his previous life, but he had never imagined he would actually be there. Surprisingly, the landscape remained virtually unchanged from decades later, as if time had stood still. No wonder Alex had been able to return here, guided by memories from a past life. Contemplating this, Alex searched for the nearest village, attempting teleportation. Unfortunately, after 7 or 8 attempts, he still couldn't find a solution. Where there are people, there's a lot of change. Despite the failure, Alex didn't mind it. He simply sighed and headed in the direction of a large village. Crystal had been standing beside Alex, watching him stand there for a moment, then suddenly stir. Startled, she instinctively called out, "Where are you going, Alex?" Alex continued walking without turning, replying indifferently, "Looking for someone." Crystal froze for a moment, then hurried after him. After only a few steps, she felt breathless and frantically called out, "What happened? Why can't I breathe?" Inhumans are human, too. While they possess special abilities, breathing is a necessity for all living things, and everyone is equally at home. Breathing is already difficult in the highlands, and Crystal's sprinting gave her a stitch in the side. Alex initially ignored her, but after a few steps, the sounds behind him faded. He quickly turned to see Crystal's face, a pale purple hue, as if she were suffocating. Alex froze for a moment, muttering to himself, "How weak." He quickly ran back, about to take her back to the plains, but suddenly remembered a fatal case of oxygen intoxication he'd encountered, and hesitated. After a moment's hesitation, Alex chose to transfer his energy to Crystal. Of course, it wasn't a direct kiss like in the movies. Alex used his energy control to gather a large ball of air, compress it, and then place it over Crystal's nose and mouth. It sounded complicated, but it was actually quite simple. With a thud, the compressed air was already between Crystal's nose and mouth. Crystal struggled, and the sudden breath of air made her feel dizzy, a mild case of oxygen intoxication. After a moment, Crystal finally recovered, still a little frightened by what she had just experienced. She looked at Alex with a more dependent look, and unknowingly moved closer to him. "Are you feeling better?" Alex didn't notice Crystal's eyes. Seeing that she had recovered, he immediately asked, "How about I take you home first?" Crystal hesitated for a while, but finally shook her head with a firm look on her face. "No, I want to find my sister. A great event, a cool mobile phone is waiting for you." Follow the official account of Kitty and Chinese website, add friends on WeChat, add official account, enter Dread, and participate now. Everyone has a prize. Follow the Dread WeChat official account now. New May, a new beginning, resume updating, and start again. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 170 Mysterious Place. Seeing Crystal's determined expression, Alex finally gave up and nodded in agreement, cautioning, "Be careful, the air's thin out here." Crystal snorted softly, freeing herself from Alex's help. She slowed her breathing and quickly adjusted. After walking for the better part of an hour, and just as Crystal was getting impatient, a village finally appeared before them. Watching the smoke curling up from the distance, Crystal exclaimed in disbelief, "There are actually people there." Crystal couldn't believe anyone could live in such a harsh climate. She had thought Alex was kidding. Alex gave Crystal a strange look, but before she could get angry, he teleported her closer to the village. The villages on the plateau weren't very large, just a few scattered houses, with children playing freely outside. Alex stopped Crystal, who was about to go forward to ask, shook his head and said softly, "No need to go, there is no one." After contacting the people in the village, Alex had secretly used telepathy to search, but found no trace of Medusa. Obviously, she did not appear here. Crystal didn't know that Alex had telepathic abilities. She looked at him with confusion, waiting for his explanation. Alex did not explain to her. He turned around to observe the direction and walked out of the village without stopping for a moment. Crystal was stunned for a moment, stomped her feet, and chased after him with an angry look on her face. She said with some dissatisfaction, "Alex, are you deliberately perfunctory to me?" It's no wonder that Crystal was suspicious of Alex's casual style of doing things. Alex paused, narrowing his eyes as he stared at Crystal. He said in a deep voice, "I'll definitely do what I promised." Seeing Crystal still seeming skeptical, Alex smiled wryly, shook his head, and explained, "I possess telepathic abilities." Crystal was startled by his words, then abruptly stepped back, folding her arms across her chest. She looked at Alex warily, as if afraid Alex would delve into her inner world. Watching Crystal's actions, Alex curled his lips, snorted with disdain, and turned to continue on his way. Although Alex had acquired Emma's telepathic abilities through cloning, he rarely used them. When he did, it was usually for targeted searches, not a comprehensive exploration of a person's mind, as he had just done. Crystal was irritated by Alex's attitude and opened her mouth to speak, but she didn't know what to say, so she simply kept her mouth shut and mumbled in silence. After walking for over 2 hours, they still encountered no villages, which again irritated Crystal. "Alex, what are you looking for?" Hearing Crystal's voice, Alex chuckled to himself, still walking at a leisurely pace. Without turning back, he spoke in a voice as lazy as if he had just woken up. "A mysterious place has appeared in the snowy area. It's a little strange, but there might be some clues." The mysterious place did exist, but it was still very far from their current location. Alex had deliberately taken the less traveled route, trying to wear down Crystal's patience until she gave up on the search for Medusa. But to Alex's surprise, after learning of Alex's purpose, Crystal didn't complain or show any impatience, following closely behind until they reached a mysterious place. "Is this the mysterious place?" Looking at the ordinary valley before her, Crystal looked at Alex with a puzzled expression, a hint of resentment creeping into her eyes. And her suspicions about Alex unconsciously surfaced. Alex, equally astonished, gazed upon the valley before him, his heart pounding as he wondered, could it be that those people were tricking me? But on second thought, Alex opted for his own telepathy. Remembering the strange legends told by the Tibetans, Alex decided to try it out for himself. According to the Tibetans, the valley had been ordinary until, out of nowhere, a thunderous roar erupted. Surprised, some daring Tibetans attempted to enter the valley to explore its depths, but for years, no one had ventured in. It was as if the entire valley were shrouded in a maze. Those who entered would wander back out, never able to enter. So magical. Alex's explanation piqued Crystal's curiosity, and she waved her arms, as if eager to try it out herself. Alex didn't try to stop him. After all, the maze wasn't dangerous, so it wouldn't hurt to let Crystal play around. The moment Alex and Crystal stepped into the valley's entrance, he felt as if he had passed through a mist and arrived in a completely new world. All around him was a vast expanse of white snow, devoid of a single color. Turning his head again, Crystal had vanished. "It feels like I've entered a magical array set by a cultivator in a fairy tale." Alex wasn't alarmed at all. He casually glanced around, his mind reminiscing about certain passages from the fairy tales he'd loved in his past life, which bore a striking resemblance to the present scene. Shaking his head and chuckling softly, Alex began to move, constantly monitoring the changes around him. Whether it was an illusion or a maze, Alex believed there must be a way through. With patience and carefulness, perhaps he could find a way. Hard work paid off, and with his precise perception of energy, Alex quickly discovered the secret. The vast white snowfield wasn't static. On the contrary, it was constantly shifting as he moved. The center of this shift was himself, but the source of this shift remained constant. "So it's right here," Alex chuckled, confidently heading towards the source of the change. Within minutes, Alex was standing at the source. But to Alex's surprise, nothing had changed around him. The snowfield remained the same. "Could I have misjudged you?" Alex wondered, about to turn and leave when he suddenly noticed the energy around him becoming more turbulent, unlike before. Alex pondered for a moment, then chose not to move. As time passed, the energy around him grew increasingly turbulent, stirring the once tranquil snowfield with a mighty whirlwind. Seeing this, Alex was not surprised, but delighted. "The Dharma, it really is here." He waited a moment longer, and suddenly, energy erupted, then vanished in an instant, the world shifting. Alex felt dizzy, and closed his eyes. When he opened them again, the snowfield had vanished, and Alex found himself in a lush valley. After hesitating for a moment, Alex took cautious steps and slowly walked towards the valley. 10 steel balls kept spinning around his body, and telepathy was ready to start at any time. After 10 years of sleep, Alex has become cautious because he doesn't want anything to happen to him again, for fear of letting down those who love him. A great event, a cool phone is waiting for you. Follow the official account of Kitty and Chinese website, add friends on WeChat, add official account, enter Dread, and participate now. Everyone has a prize. Follow the Dread WeChat official account now. It's been a little longer. Scorpio needs to slow down, and will increase updates in the future. Chapter 171 Mysterious Mage. As he walked deeper and deeper, Alex encountered no danger, which surprised him and made him even more cautious. Gradually, he found himself at the center of the valley, where a Taoist priest sat cross-legged before him. He wore a slate-gray robe, its long hem draped over his legs. His snow-white hair was casually tied in a bun, flowing down behind him. His face was rosy and as pink as a baby's, a true example of a young man with white hair. Alex's knowledge of Marvel only came from a few Marvel films, but he knew that the Marvel universe was at least a science fiction world. The sudden appearance of such an immortal-like figure was clearly out of place. Hesitating for a moment, Alex cautiously approached and called softly, "Excuse me, little one, who are you?" The Taoist priest slowly opened his eyes, a strange light flashing in his clear eyes, and a hint of inexplicable meaning filled his gaze towards Alex. Alex was startled, then recovered in an instant. He took a deep breath and replied in Chinese, also speaking, "Hello, I'm a traveler who accidentally wandered into this valley. I apologize for the intrusion." The Taoist clearly possessed no energy, but the fleeting glint in his eyes, evidently more than that of a mortal, frightened Alex. "Oh, you're Chinese." The Taoist looked him up and down in wonder, then complimented him, "You speak Chinese so well. My mother is Chinese." Under the Taoist's gaze, Alex dared not conceal anything and spoke in detail. "My name is Alex, and my Chinese name is Zhang Xuan." The Taoist chuckled, nodded, and asked again, "I'm curious. How did you manage to penetrate my formation?" Seeing the Taoist's gentle smile and calm gaze, Alex felt as if he were being seen through, and felt extremely uncomfortable. He wanted to hide something, but he spoke honestly, "To be honest, old man, my mother is a mutant, and my father is an inhuman." Alex didn't know why he said this, and he didn't care whether the Taoist knew about mutants and inhumans. He just said it out of nowhere. After being shocked, the Taoist suddenly realized that he knew very well what mutants and inhumans were. What surprised Alex was that after knowing his identity, the Taoist suddenly stopped talking and just observed him from time to time. After a long while, he said, "My name is Ancient One, an ancient Eastern sorcerer." Eastern sorcerer. Alex looked at the Taoist who called himself Ancient One with surprise, and his mind once again popped up the fairy tales he had read in his previous life. Could this Taoist be the legendary immortal? Ancient One, with a faint smile on his face, gazed at Alex and began to explain, "There's magic in the West, and sorcery in the East. Magic is based on the four elements of earth, fire, water, and wind. One uses one's own magic to connect with the elements of heaven and earth to launch attacks or defend. Then there's the mysterious dark magic of feeding a demon with one's own body, gaining powerful demonic power." Alex stared at Ancient One, stunned. He couldn't understand what this Taoist was up to, why he was discussing Western magic and Eastern sorcery. Ancient One didn't seem to notice Alex's expression, and continued his explanation. Eastern sorcery, the five elements of gold, wood, water, fire, earth, and heaven, draws the power of heaven and earth into one's body, turning the world upside down with a single movement or stillness. Then there are the mysterious formations. With a meager force, one can borrow the power of heaven and earth, exerting their might, and transforming in unpredictable ways. Alex was stunned again, his previous thoughts surfacing uncontrollably. Could this really be an immortal? Just as he was puzzled, Ancient One's voice rang out again. "I'd like to take you on as my disciple. Would you be willing to become my disciple?" A disciple? Alex looked at the Ancient One with a mixture of laughter and tears. It seemed he was saying all this just to recruit him. With the ability to replicate and control energy alone, Alex felt he didn't need a master. Once he mastered these two abilities, he could roam freely. The Ancient One didn't know why he suddenly felt the urge to take on a disciple, but he firmly believed in fate and destiny. Providence had brought Alex into the valley where he practiced, and provided he saw him wanting to become his disciple. However, the Ancient One quickly noticed that Alex seemed conflicted. Could it be that he doesn't want to become my disciple, The Ancient One looked at Alex with a gloomy expression, a hint of resentment lingering in his heart. The Ancient One, after all, was a master of both Western and Eastern magic, proficient in both Western and Eastern techniques, and a world-renowned sorcerer supreme. He wondered how many people wanted to become his disciple. Alex's hesitation was understandable, and it was no wonder the Ancient One was somewhat discontent. Suddenly, the Ancient One considered Alex's unique identity, possessing both mutant and inhuman blood. No wonder he was so proud. However, this didn't satisfy the Ancient One, and he decided to teach this ignorant Alex a lesson. You think you're powerful. The Ancient One's expression suddenly turned cold, and his voice was cold and cold, making him feel as if he were sinking into an icy cellar. Alex was frightened and shuddered uncontrollably. He wanted to shake his head, but subconsciously nodded. The Ancient One stood up, brushed his clothes lightly with a hand, turned to Alex, and snorted softly. If that's the case, old man, let me teach you. Before Alex could react, the Ancient One had already launched his attack. There was no dazzling magical effect, no earth-shattering transformation. Just when Alex was about to believe that the other party was just a fraud, his whole body suddenly tightened, as if bound by a rope, unable to escape. Telepathy failed completely for the first time, and it couldn't even be activated. The inexplicable invisible object that bound him seemed to have bound his head as well, making his mind unable to function normally and intermittent. Carefully feeling the location of the inexplicable invisible object that bound him, Alex tried to cut them off with the help of steel balls, but also to no avail. Energy control. Alex could feel the inexplicable invisible object, but he couldn't control it at all, let alone escape. What on earth do you want to do? Alex looked at the Taoist in front of him in panic, his eyes full of fear. The other party could bind him so easily, his strength was really horrifying. Ancient One smiled and explained calmly, this is a very simple spell, both Eastern and Western, wind binding. Alex was stunned when he heard this, and instantly understood that he wanted to take him in as a disciple. A fantastic event. Win a cool phone. Follow the official Dread Wetchit account, add friends on Wetchit, then add an account, then type in Dread to participate. Everyone wins a prize. Follow the Dread Wetchit account now. Chapter 172 The United States and the Soviet Union. Although Alex was deeply displeased with the Ancient One's coercive tactics, the situation was overwhelming, and he had no choice but to yield. All right, I accept your invitation. Looking at the reluctant Alex, the Ancient One's slightly pale brows knitted together in a slight frown. He said somewhat wearily, as the saying goes, a forced melon is not sweet. Since you don't want to train with me, then leave. As he spoke, the Ancient One dispelled his magic, closed his eyes again, and ignored Alex. Alex twisted his body, looking at the Ancient One with hesitation. After a moment's hesitation, he cautiously retreated. The magic displayed by the Ancient One, while powerful, couldn't truly move Alex. He believed that if he could achieve a certain level of energy control, he could replicate the Ancient One's wind-binding spell. With this in mind, seeing that the Ancient One had given up, Alex decided not to pursue him. After retreating a few steps, he immediately turned and sprinted towards the valley entrance. As Alex disappeared around the corner, the trance-bound Ancient One slowly opened his eyes and sighed, "We're not meant to be together, what a shame." Alex, unaware that the Ancient One was still muttering about him, ran all the way to the valley's entrance and burst out without hesitation. To Alex's surprise, he didn't enter the strange illusion, but instead ran straight out of the valley. Outside, Crystal stood bored, her delicate face etched with anxiety. Seeing Alex, Crystal rushed over eagerly, clasping her arms around him and choking back. "Alex, you're finally out." Alex chuckled dryly, pulling away from Crystal's arms. Looking up at the now dark sky, he asked, "Crystal, how about we go back and continue tomorrow?" Crystal blushed, letting go of Alex. Unusually, she nodded in agreement without hesitation. Alex didn't think twice before teleporting her back to the floating temple. As soon as she appeared, Emma immediately approached, grabbed Alex, and ran out without a word. Crystal was stunned for a moment before coming to her senses. After a moment's hesitation, she followed, all the way to the main hall of the floating temple. "What happened?" Alex asked, confused, letting Emma hold him tightly, not struggling. Emma turned to look at Alex, and just as she was about to explain, she suddenly noticed Crystal chasing after her and froze. Alex, surprised, turned to look, and also spotted Crystal, feeling a little embarrassed. Emma was stunned for a moment, but quickly recovered and rushed Alex into the main hall. Inside, Howard, Nick Fury, Natasha, and Carter were seated, each with a gloomy expression on their faces. Seeing their expressions, Alex felt a surge of worry. Emma and Alex had just sat down when Crystal followed them into the main hall. Everyone was startled for a moment, then stood aside obediently, their eyes fixed on Alex without blinking. Nick Fury and the others glanced at the crystal in surprise, but then ignored him. Turning to Alex, he lowered his voice and said, "According to reliable intelligence, Sebastian Shaw is planning to provoke a war between the United States and the Soviet Union, thereby launching World War III. Since the end of World War II, due to ideological reasons, capitalism, led by the United States, has imposed severe economic sanctions on the Soviet Union, and relations between the two countries have degenerated into a Cold War-like state. The two sides are vying for power, and the world situation is extremely serious. If there is any misstep, World War III will surely break out." Alex's face changed at the words, and scenes from the movie X-Men First Class flashed through his mind. In the movie, Sebastian Shaw secretly controlled a Soviet general, first provoking the Cuban Missile Crisis, and then tampering with US and Soviet warships. If it weren't for the intervention of young Professor X and Magneto, World War II could have really broken out. What surprised Alex even more was that, despite losing the White Queen and the Red Devil, Sebastian Shaw had still taken the step. Thoughts raced through his mind, but Alex kept saying, "We must stop him. We must do everything in our power. The intelligence we have right now is scant and inaccurate, making it impossible to make timely arrangements." Emma, well aware of Sebastian Shaw's ambitions, wouldn't tolerate her whims. The sage has lost Sebastian Shaw's trust. She hasn't even heard of this plan. Alex frowned and turned to Nick Fury. Before Alex could ask, Nick Fury explained, "SHIELD's agents in the Soviet Union have been eliminated. We have no idea what's happening there, and we have no clue what Sebastian Shaw's plans are." Wang Xiao's scowl deepened. He knew what was coming, but he didn't know how to stop it. Was he going to emulate the young Professor X-Men in the movies? Nick Fury and the others had no idea what Alex was thinking. Judging by his expression, they assumed he was pondering a strategy and asked, "Alex, any ideas?" During World War II, Alex had been the one who came up with most of the team's ideas, a habit they continue to this day. Alex had been reminiscing about the story behind the movie and happened to think of the Cuban Missile Crisis. Hearing the noise, Alex suddenly snapped awake and instinctively shouted, "Cuban Missile Crisis, huh?" Everyone stared at Alex in surprise. Just as they were about to ask, Nick Fury suddenly stood up, a hint of ecstasy on his dark face. Following him, Carter and Natasha also came to their senses. Only Emma and Tony remained bewildered. "A few days ago, we received news that the Soviet Union appears to be interested in deploying missiles in Cuba." Alex's words immediately reminded Nick Fury of his previous intelligence. Coupled with Sebastian Shaw's actions, he connected the two events. Deploying missiles in Cuba would seriously threaten American security. The US will absolutely not approve it. As soon as Nick Fury finished speaking, Carter added, "At that time, with just the slightest provocation from Sebastian Shaw, a nuclear war between the US and the Soviet Union could easily be triggered. World War II wouldn't be far off. So, what's the situation with the Soviet Union now?" Alex realized that the key to the matter lay with the Soviet Union, and Sebastian Shaw was also provoking the Soviet Union. If the Soviet Union could be persuaded to abandon the missile deployment in Cuba, Sebastian Shaw's plan would fail. Hearing Alex's question, Nick Fury shook his head with a wry smile and reiterated helplessly, "We have completely cut off any news from the Soviet Union. What a great event. A cool mobile phone is waiting for you." Follow the official account of Kitty Chinese website, on WatchIt, add friends, add official account, enter Dread, and participate now. Everyone has a prize. Follow the Dread WatchIt official account now. Sorry, it's still too late no matter how hard you try. Chapter 173 Soviet Union. Hearing Nick Fury's slightly complaining voice, Alex's frown deepened. After a moment's pause, he spoke, "So, they've already taken action." Although Alex wasn't a member of SHIELD, he was familiar with Nick Fury and his team and knew the depth of SHIELD's intelligence channels. Yet, such a powerful intelligence system had completely lost contact with the Soviet Union. One could only imagine what had happened to the Soviet Union. And the only person who could have done that was probably Sebastian Shaw. If the Soviets insist on going their own way, The United States won't give up. Carter, still responsible for communication between SHIELD and the U.S. government, was well aware of their stance. After a moment's reflection, his face paled. The U.S. government wouldn't care if the Soviets were being manipulated. If the Soviets dared to deploy missiles in Cuba again, the U.S. fleet would undoubtedly engage them without hesitation. Hearing Carter's words, Nick Fury, Howard, and the others also frowned. It had only been a dozen years since the end of World War II. Another war would make the outcome unpredictable. Furthermore, both the United States and the Soviet Union now possessed nuclear weapons. If a nuclear war broke out, the consequences would be truly devastating. Emma, pick some people and keep them on standby. Alex tapped the table lightly, slowly stood up, turned to Emma, and then looked at Nick Fury. Nick, try to communicate with the U.S. government too. I'll go to the Soviet Union and see. The key to avoiding World War I was finding the culprit, Sebastian Shaw. Eliminating him would allow the Soviet Union to wake up. Alex didn't need to say much. Emma understood what he wanted with just a simple sentence. She nodded in agreement, then looked at him with a worried look. Be careful. Emma had originally wanted to say, I'll go with you, but then, thinking of Alex's abilities, she abandoned the idea. Going would only cause trouble for Alex. Alex, a man of action, gave a few instructions and turned to leave. The Soviet Union was not a benign place, so Alex decided to upgrade his abilities. Seeing Alex walking out, Crystal hesitated for a moment, then ran out too. She quickly caught up with Alex and stammered, Alex, can you take me with you? Alex turned his head to look at Crystal beside him and asked in surprise, why? The Soviet Union was not a place where Medusa could appear. Why would Crystal follow her? I just want to go with you. Crystal looked embarrassed, her words halting, extremely shy. Seeing Alex's expressionless face, she was immediately disappointed. She forced herself to remain calm and said slowly, if it doesn't work, then forget it. Alex stared at Crystal, his mind still pondering the truth of her words. After a long pause, he finally nodded and agreed, okay, I'll take you. Seeing Crystal's joy, Alex began to believe her excuse, but he still had to say something. He deliberately put on a stern face and sternly warned, follow me, and you must obey me in everything, otherwise. Before Alex could finish, Crystal impatiently patted her chest and promised, don't worry, I'll do whatever you say. Alex smiled bitterly and shook his head, hesitating whether taking Crystal with him was the right thing to do. But since he had already agreed, Alex would not go back on his word. After copying a few abilities he liked, Alex immediately disappeared from the floating island with Crystal. When he reappeared, Alex and Crystal were already in the Soviet Union. Alex had visited this country only a handful of times, both in his past and present lives. However, some things remained unchanged through time, like Red Square and the Kremlin. Taking advantage of the night, Alex and Crystal quietly appeared on Red Square. Even under the cover of night, Red Square was bustling with activity, and their presence went unnoticed. What are we going to do now? Crystal asked, her face flushed with excitement, her eyes sparkling like a fox that had stolen a chick, beautiful and adorable. Alex found Crystal's expression amusing, and with a soft chuckle, he pulled Crystal away from Red Square once again. Don't talk. Seeing Crystal curiously survey her surroundings and opening her mouth to speak, Alex quickly warned her telepathically. Crystal's eyes widened, and she looked at Alex in amazement. Although she had known Alex possessed telepathic abilities for a long time, experiencing them firsthand was still quite shocking. Meanwhile, Crystal began to mentally consider Alex's abilities, energy control, spatial teleportation, and telepathy. 3 abilities, 1 inhuman, 1 mutant, and seemingly 1 more. Alex, unaware of Crystal's thoughts, surveyed the surroundings and, with Crystal, headed deeper into the Kremlin. Anyone capable of influencing Soviet government decisions must be a powerful figure within the government. They must be inside. Of course, along the way, Alex constantly used telepathy to peer into the minds of those he encountered, searching for anything that caught his eye. It wasn't long before Alex finally found what he was looking for. Unfortunately, the general wasn't in the Kremlin, not even in Moscow. Naturally, Sebastian Shaw had followed the general out of Moscow. Armed with accurate information, Alex returned to Red Square with Crystal, his face sullen. What's wrong? Crystal looked at Alex in surprise, puzzled by his anger. He's just not in Moscow? We'll just go find him. Alex pondered for a moment, turned his head to look at the Kremlin behind him. and returned to the floating temple with Crystal. Looking at the familiar surroundings, Crystal was stunned. She stared at Alex blankly, her face full of surprise. Why are we back again, Crystal? I'm sorry, I have something to do. Alex had no intention of explaining anything to Crystal. He turned around and ran out of the floating temple. Before leaving, he turned back to Crystal and said embarrassedly, "Next time I have the chance, I'll take you to the Soviet Union to play." With that, Alex disappeared from the gate, leaving Crystal alone to stare blankly at her surroundings. After a long while, she sighed and returned to her room with a helpless look on her face. Chapter 174 Dead Loop. After dropping the crystal, Alex activated teleportation again, reappearing on the streets of New York. Alex had originally intended to teleport directly to Nick Fury's office at SYNOPSIS, but the teleportation failed. Desperate, Alex found a location in New York and teleported there directly. "Let's go find Howard first," Alex muttered softly, turning and heading towards Stark Industries, glancing around as he walked. New York had changed dramatically after 10 years, becoming even more prosperous and bustling. The streets were filled with all sorts of fashionable people, and of course, the business elites, bustling about in suits and ties, were also among them. 10 years later, Stark Industries had become even more prosperous. From afar, Alex could see the towering buildings in the heart of Manhattan's business district, prominently marked with the words Stark Industries. Seeing the conspicuous sign, Alex couldn't help but curl his lips, and his pace quickened. Soon, Alex arrived in front of the Stark Industries building. Without alerting anyone, Alex used teleportation to quickly locate Howard in his top-floor office. Ever since moving the lab to the floating island, Howard had spent most of his time there, only returning to the office on rare occasions to attend to company matters. Howard's return this time was partly due to Alex's request, and partly because the company had already accumulated a lot of work. Alex had been standing across from Howard for several minutes, but Howard, absorbed in his paperwork, hadn't noticed. Alex, helpless, had to speak. Howard shuddered at the sound of his voice, then looked up to see the expression on Alex's face change dramatically, from fear to surprise, and finally to joy. "Alex, what are you doing here?" Howard put down the documents he was holding, stood up, and walked quickly to Alex's side, his expression growing increasingly joyful. Alex rolled his eyes, not dwelling on it, and asked directly, "Where is Nick now?" "I need to see him right now." Howard was taken aback for a moment, then quickly realized what was happening. He chuckled and said, "Due to the increase in staff, SHIELD has moved to a new location. I'll take you to see him." Howard held a very special position within SHIELD, one of its founders and its largest funder. Most of the people within SHIELD held him in high esteem. Alex thought for a moment and didn't refuse, though he remained somewhat hesitant. He gestured to the documents on his desk and asked hesitantly, "Will it interfere with your work?" "There's always work to be done." Howard waved his hand, a look of disdain on his face. It wasn't long before Alex found Nick Fury at SHIELD's new headquarters. "Alex, why are you so anxious to see me? Is there something wrong?" Nick Fury had already known Alex's purpose when he approached Howard, and seeing Alex's eager expression, he was even more convinced. Alex frowned slightly, his eyes swept around covertly, then he lowered his voice and asked softly, "What is the attitude of the US government now, not giving in?" Nick Fury's dark face was full of anger. He reached out to touch the eye patch on his blind eye, and a fierce look flashed in his one eye. "As long as the Soviet fleet dares to enter, the US government will immediately choose to go to war. There will be no room for maneuver." Alex was not surprised at all when he heard this. After pondering for a moment, he looked up at Nick Fury, his eyes slightly narrowed, like a wolf, who in the government is the most active. Alex hesitated for a moment, and added, "For war, World War III." Nick Fury frowned when he heard this, and wrinkles like sausages unconsciously appeared on his dark forehead. "There are many people like this." As he spoke, Nick Fury blurted out a number of names in a row, among whom were well-known political stars in the US government. The most active. Alex took a deep breath and shouted, "The kind who can't wait for war to break out." This time, Nick Fury's silence lasted even longer. After a long pause, Nick Fury spoke again. "So, there is one. But," Nick Fury paused, took a deep breath, and continued, "but he's not that obvious. He's not very conspicuous, yet he's able to influence the decisions of the entire US government. constantly tempting the government to make tough choices. What's more, this guy is only a colonel, not even a general. Nick Fury was a little amused at this. This was simply ridiculous. Alex sighed and said helplessly, "This guy must be Sebastian Shaw's man. He has people in both the Soviet Union and the United States. I'm going to kill him now." Natasha was also in Nick Fury's office, but she hadn't said a word the whole time. Now she suddenly spoke, startling everyone. Alex rolled his eyes and said unhappily, "If killing people could solve the problem, why would I bother you?" Without waiting for anyone else to speak, Alex unloaded his observations from the Soviet Union, along with some of his speculations. "I suspect the Soviets also want to seize the opportunity to deploy missiles in Cuba. If Sebastian Shaw's men initially provoked the Soviet government, then the Soviet government took the lead. Even the person deeply influenced by Sebastian Shaw didn't say a word. They took the entire responsibility, refusing outsiders any interference." This was also why Alex hadn't found anyone in Moscow. They had already been dispatched, driven away from the core of the mission. After hearing Alex's words, everyone fell silent. If it had been just Sebastian Shaw alone, they might have had some confidence in a solution. But now, the matter was very likely to involve the Soviet government. 99% of those who defied the state apparatus perished in its path. "What do we do now, Alex?" Natasha realized the gravity and crisis of the situation. Her playful expression turned grave, and her slightly trembling voice barely concealed the excitement within. Alex smiled wryly and shook his head, a look of frustration on his face. "The Soviets want to fight. What else can we do?" Alex had considered secretly trying to change the minds of the Soviet leader, but experience had taught him that this wasn't feasible. To be the head of the nation required a spirit and determination unmatched by ordinary people, and changing the minds of such individuals was incredibly difficult. "Are we just going to sit back and watch?" Nick Fury hesitated. SHIELD stood for the protection of humanity, and World War II was certainly not something Nick Fury wanted to see coming. "We'll see what happens." He got the answer he wanted, and the situation entered an unresolvable cycle, with everyone watching as it continued to deteriorate. Chapter 175 The crisis begins. In the struggle for supremacy between the US and the Soviet Union, both Alex and SHIELD stood aside, watching helplessly as both nations, instigated by Sebastian Shaw, mobilized their forces, casting a shadow over the world. Some fought tooth and nail to prevent the conflict, while others instigated it, each with their own distinct attitude. However, none of this concerned Alex anymore. He took the crystal and continued his search for Medusa. It wasn't that Alex didn't care, but rather that he was powerless. The power dynamics of the great powers were simply beyond the reach of a small figure like him. Alex could put everything aside to accompany the crystal in the search for Medusa, but Nick Fury, Howard, and the others were forced to focus their attention on this momentous event that would shape the future. At SHIELD, Nick Fury leaned back in his chair, his head in his hands, gazing at the young clerk across from him. A deep glint gleamed in his single eye, his expression frozen. After a long silence, Nick Fury finally said quietly, "Okay, I understand. You can leave first." Watching the young clerk walk out, Nick Fury's tense nerves suddenly relaxed. He sighed, a look of resignation on his face. Just then, Howard pushed the door open and walked in. Nick Fury didn't have time to change his expression. Seeing Nick Fury's expression, Howard's heart skipped a beat. His voice trembled slightly as he asked, "What happened, Nick?" "The Soviet warships have set sail." Seeing Howard, Nick Fury's nervousness vanished, and his smile grew even more bitter. The Soviet fleet, loaded with missiles, had already sailed towards Cuba. The Soviet Union had made its position clear, leaving the United States with no choice but to go to war with the Soviet Union. Howard was stunned at first, then reacted with a look of disbelief. "Really?" Nick Fury said nothing, merely nodding stiffly. Howard also fell silent, unconsciously walking over to the sofa and sitting down, his head lowered, almost touching the ground. After a long pause, Howard finally looked up and saw Nick Fury, who had noticed the movement and turned around. His expression turned serious. "What is SHIELD planning?" Judging by the current situation, a conflict between the US and the Soviet Union was highly likely, potentially escalating into a global Third World War. As one of the world's leading intelligence organizations, SHIELD held a unique position. Everyone wanted SHIELD's help, but everyone also wanted SHIELD to disappear. Nations are nations, and humans are humans. Nick Fury's face darkened. He stared at Howard and spoke word by word. SHIELD serves only to protect all of humanity. This was SHIELD's original purpose, and it was the sole hope of Alex and others who had just experienced the trauma of World War II. Shortly after Nick Fury received the news, the U.S. government also learned of the impending Soviet missile shipment to Cuba. Following a brief meeting, the U.S. government also dispatched the 7th Fleet, both to impose a comprehensive armed blockade of Cuba and to intercept the Soviet fleet. As the U.S. and Soviet fleets set sail, global tensions intensified, even affecting the mutants of the savage lands. "What's going on?" Alex frowned at the young man before him, his expression stern. After Emma's persistent persuasion, Alex finally took over as the combat instructor at the X Academy. Besides helping Crystal find her sister Medusa, he also found time to teach the students, many of whom were already full members of the X-Men. The young man before him was none other than Raimi, the former Tarzan of the Apes. Today, he's not only a Hollywood superstar but also a member of the X-Men, regularly undergoing combat training. Of course, his primary responsibilities remain filming and promoting mutants. However, during the training session, Raimi had clearly lost his focus and was thrown several times by Alex, leaving his handsome face bruised. Hearing Alex's voice, Raimi suddenly woke up, lowering his head awkwardly and mumbling nothing. "Tell me, what's going on, Raimi?" Alex had known Raimi for 10 years and knew him well. Although he could be a bit careless and unfocused on a daily basis, when it mattered most, he was incredibly serious. Raimi's performance today was truly unusual. Raimi looked up, stole a glance at Alex, and hesitated for a moment before asking, "Are the United States and the Soviet Union really going to war?" Raimi had spent most of his life in the United States, and the tensions between the USSR and the USSR were affecting every aspect of the American landscape, especially in Hollywood, the beacon of the entertainment industry. Almost everyone was talking about it. Alex hadn't expected Raimi to abandon his duties over this matter. He looked at Raimi with a mixture of amusement and annoyance. "What does this have to do with you? What if they really fight?" Of course, Alex knew a war between the US and the Soviet Union wouldn't happen, whether in the real world or in the comics. If it were to happen, Alex would absolutely intervene and stop it in its tracks. Having experienced the baptism of World War II, Alex loathed all wars, whether just or evil. Raimi was speechless after Alex's rebuke, stammering. Seeing Raimi's expression, Alex chuckled softly, patted his shoulder, and calmly reassured him, "Okay, don't worry, they won't fight." After reassuring Raimi, Alex didn't immediately search for the crystal. Instead, he teleported to SHIELD's new offices. "Why are you here?" Howard, who was in Nick Fury's office, was surprised to see Alex suddenly appear. A hint of teasing crossed his slightly raised eyes. "Aren't you just hanging out with your new girlfriend?" Alex had been spending a lot of time with Crystal lately, leaving early and returning late, much to the chagrin of Emma and the other girls. So Howard was just joking. Alex knew Howard was joking, so he didn't argue. He turned to Nick Fury and asked, "What's the situation?" After learning of the U.S. military intervention, the Soviets sent additional fleets to join the escort. Nick Fury casually tossed out a piece of paper detailing the size of the Soviet fleet, which was truly magnificent. "I expected it," Alex shrugged, his expression remaining casual, his emotions unwavering. "When will the Soviet fleet arrive in the waters off Cuba?" Judging by the current situation, the US and the Soviet Union were already on the verge of war. Alex had to find a way to prevent the start of this war, just like in the movies. The US fleet has established a cordon at sea as a warning to the Soviets. Nick Fury reached over a pile of documents and pulled out a photo. It showed a heaving sea, with several buoys bobbing in the water. "In 3 days, the vanguard of the Soviet fleet will reach this cordon." Alex frowned slightly, paused, and repeated, 3 days. Even as he spoke, he was already secretly formulating a strategy. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.